And we're back.
Welcome to No Direction, the Pathfinder News, Reviews, and Interviews podcast. I'm Ryan Costello.
And I'm Jefferson J. Thacker, also known as Baron.
This is going to be a big episode. This is going to be a different episode from even our other reviews because the Pathfinder Playtest is here.
Indeed. And I'm so glad to finally get my hands on this thing.
Param?
I mean, it's awesome. They did this weird thing with sorcerers where they get these bloodlines. And
Param?
yeah.
Look, you got a white dragon, you got a sorcerer and
right.
a fighter, but you just no.
And I picked it up at Gen Con.
Like 10 years better.
Oh.
For those listening at home, Param lifted up the Pathfinder beta playtest from first edition. It was a sight gag and a clever one. Let's start right there, Param. It bugs me that this is just called Pathfinder Playtest.
I know, it's messing
rulebook
with me.
Instead of second edition playtest rulebook. There already was a Pathfinder playtest.
No, there was a Pathfinder beta.
All right, okay, so alpha, beta, and now playtest. But they've had, anyway, it bugs me. I think that somewhere in the title should have been second edition, especially after Wizards of the Coast just tried to make 5th edition just called Dungeons and Dragons, and there was so much just organic people calling it 5th edition that they eventually just scrapped it and said, fine, it's 5th edition. I hope that Paizo's plan is not to make this just Pathfinder and not Pathfinder 2nd edition or Pathfinder 2e.
Well, no, they'll go better. They'll follow the iPhone route, and this will just be Pathfinder 2019.
Or they'll do like Samsung, not UI, but their engines, and just name it after a weird candy with no rhyme or reason to it.
But
or they'll name it like Hurricanes and just pick a random human name. This is Pathfinder Jeffrey.
Oh, what's wrong with Pathfinder Jeffrey?
Oh man, Justin Sluter and Hill Giant both kind of came to the conclusion that it should be Pathfinder X.
Ooh, I like it. I like
10 years
it.
of Pathfinder, yeah.
I like it. And like it should be slightly more realistic, and you should totally get a cool ninja cyborg sidekick with a laser sword that becomes playable halfway through the series.
Plus, if you'll recall, Jason X, the tagline was "Evil gets an upgrade," and for probably my entire life since that movie came out, I've been calling things blank X, something gets an upgrade.
Oh man, that movie was a very special moment in college in which I could enjoy terrible movies like that.
Well then, let's talk about that later, because right now we are talking about Pathfinder X, Action Economy gets an upgrade.
Oh man, and you did mention the best part of this. This is a huge book. Not just physically. I mean, this thing is heavy, even for its page count, because the Starfinder core rulebook is not as heavy as this darn thing is. So I'm pretty sure they've got some sort of weird paper stock thing going on here.
Man, my Starfinder core rulebook is much closer than my Pathfinder stuff over there, but it's just out of reach, and I'm tempted to subtly lean over just to compare the two. So you've got the hardcover version over there, right?
I have, just for those keeping track at home, I have the hardcover, the soft cover, and a slightly dented collector's edition.
Collector's edition is soft cover too, right?
No.
It's hard?
Faux leather hardcover, gold foil emboss, like they've been doing with all their limited editions lately.
Nice. So I got 2 copies of the soft cover. One of them I paid for, and one of them was provided by Paizo for this review.
Yep.
So just full disclosure, I have review copies of everything that was in print provided by Paizo, which is the exact same order I made when I placed my pre-order long before the conversation ever started. So I guess...
In full disclosure, I do too, as do several members of our network. And it's not just for review, it's for another project we'll talk about later.
But for now, we're here to talk about the playtest for the second edition of Pathfinder. It launched at Gen Con, both digital and print. The digital copy is still available for free on Paizo.com. That is a digital copy of the rulebook that we're going to be reviewing. Doomsday Dawn, which we will not be reviewing. I will make a couple of mentions of it when we get to the GMing section, but nothing will spoil anything from Doomsday Dawn, which I feel is very important because most of the playtest feedback will be centered around Doomsday Dawn.
And a good chunk of it will also be centered around the Pathfinder Society Society playtest adventures that are going to be coming out.
That's right. The Rose Street something?
Rose Street Revenge is the first one.
It's got a name.
Yep. And I'm going to be running that very soon here locally for our PFS.
I thought Rose Street Revenge was I thought that was the name of the whole suite of scenario, or their quests, right?
That's the first one. It's a 4-part quest series, but the others are not.
Okay. Gotcha. There is also the flip map, which is being released as a PDF. There's the bestiary, which is only released as a PDF, something I have not cracked the digital spine on yet, because I have been reading a lot of Pathfinder playtest material this past couple of weeks.
Okay. Hold on. We have
ma'am.
red. This is the first time I've had red since they fixed my internet. So, yay.
You are a little garbly.
Yeah. It looks like it is on it's on the mend, but no, it's struggling really badly. Sorry, gang. We'll edit this out. I'm trying to see if it'll recover on its own without us having to restart the stream.
Sluter does say he's getting lots of lag. Anyone else? Getting some buffering as well. Says Demonicola? We've got some people that are helping us with the PFS quest names. So by now, I have a feeling people have heard your warning. So, boy, would this be a good time to talk about Jason X while we wait for the internet to clear up?
Okay, hold on a second.
Guess.
I'm going to go in. I'm going to.
Yep.
It did a very weird thing where it. That's stupid weird. Okay.
Okay.
We're good. I think we're good. Let's give me 5 seconds of silence so I know where to edit this out of the audio. Those of you watching us on
sound pretty
YouTube,
garbly to me.
we might need to restart the Skype call then.
Ugh. All right. Sorry,
Hey,
folks.
guys.
We will be right back.
We'll be right back.
Hello. Are we live?
Yes, we are live.
Okay. Hello, audience. That was even faster than I was expecting it to be. You sound much better, Param.
Excellent. I
right,
think
you
we
ready
can
to-
actually probably attribute a lot of that to Skype because I just checked my internet and it was fine. It was Skype that was being a jerk to us. Not that Skype ever is a jerk to us.
All right, I'm going to give Justin Franklin a shout out for his Captain Blackfur reference in chat, and then I guess give us 2 seconds of silence, and we'll get back into it.
Excellent. And we're back.
This is going to be a different review for the No Direction Network because although we've been reviewing a lot of books in the 10 years that we've been reviewing Pathfinder, including reviewing the Pathfinder core rulebook, we always had a basis for comparison. We had 3.5 before we had the core rulebook.
Right.
We even had the alpha and the beta that we could compare it to.
Right.
And so when you looked at the, say, Barbarian, it was like in the context when compared to the 3.5 Barbarian, power level, how the rules work and whatever. We still have some of that context, but because the engine has been replaced, we can't just say like, and here's the classes and here's what we like about them, because it's not just compared to anything that we are super familiar with.
Right.
And so even though the rulebook is laid out very similar to the core rulebook, we're going to start by talking about the system itself, the changes. We're going to talk broadly about them, and then we're going to talk about things we like, things we dislike about them specifically. After that, we're going to talk about character creation and options, but we are not going to give it a full option review like we would for most of our reviews. We are going to revisit this content over several more episodes, dozens of them.
Yep.
And this will be a combination of to digest the system and to play the system. Because I don't know about you, Param, I've played just the 2 playtests that Jason Mullman has run us through. Oh, no, and the session that Luis ran me through at PaizoCon. Have you played any game as a GM or as a player outside of those playtests and preview scenarios?
Just some improvised home stuff, and I've been prepping the PFS scenario, so I have at least that aspect from a GM standpoint of getting a game ready to run.
Okay, good. So that's good. You'll have a little more context than I will, but I do believe that in a couple of weeks, if we review specific options, especially the classes, we'll be able to get a little more granular with our reviews because we will both have more experience by then.
Right. Yeah. And also, we will have a lot to talk about on every aspect of this book. And
yes,
as long as our episodes are, they're not long enough for us to spend an hour on each class, which I have every intention to do for some of these. I have opinions.
It would be nice if we could talk about Gen Con, which was just a week and a half ago.
Oh, really?
I know. Well, I guess 2 weeks ago was the setup day for Gen Con.
I thought
we
this
both
was still
had Gen
Con
Con experiences. I know. It feels like forever ago.
No, it doesn't. I thought this was still Gen Con.
Well,
no.
Like I said, we both had very different experiences with Gen Con.
Is this where I have to shout out to the sponsors and then thank Pazzo for providing us with the prizes?
You could do that later, but sure, why not do it now as well?
Well, thank you, Pazzo, for providing us with the giveaway prizes we've been giving out today. And please be sure to visit our seminar coverage. Oh, man, I've said this so many times.
Well, and just to be clear, we're not giving out anything today.
No, we aren't? Okay, good. No, we're not giving out prizes today. No, I'm not even logged into NatBot.
Param, on page 4, we've got the Welcome to Pathfinder letter from the entire design team.
Yes, we do.
There is an important sentence in here that I take as the mission statement for this entire system.
Okay.
Our aim is to make the game easier to learn, simpler to play, while maintaining the depth of character and adventure options that have always defined Pathfinder.
Okay.
So we'll break that down. Mm-hmm. Easier to learn.
Okay.
Simpler to play. Depth of options.
That's the goals.
That is the goals of the Pathfinder 2nd Edition playtest. You say with clear intent.
I think they're admirable goals.
I agree. And I like a complex, meaty system, which Pathfinder 1st Edition is, but I do agree that the meat doesn't, or the bones don't connect together as well as they always should, and especially the more meat that got added to the bones, the more the bones get a little brittle. So it's a good time to just start this skeleton from scratch, like a good necromancer who's just tired of his old minion.
I mean, I view Pathfinder as like my really reliable old Toyota Corolla. I've had it for decades. I know it's got problems. I know what it means when the engine starts making that weird noise, and I know not to push it above 75 miles an hour because it just can't do that no more. And in a lot of ways, the 3E OGL version of the D20 system, which is what Pathfinder was a clear descendant of, and even Starfinder is a clear descendant of that lineage, has its problems we know about. But there are comfortable problems. We've known about them for years. We've learned to get around them. We all have our very special techniques. We know not to hug the corner that tight because that means that the wheel's going to wobble. We know not to slam the brakes too much because that's when you're going to, wear out your pads. And we know not to rev the engine too high or it'll stall out.
So let's take this new Pathfinder for a test drive. We are going to start with gameplay in the system. So that includes Chapter 1, the overview, Chapter 9, playing the game, and Chapter 10, GMing, as well as the appendices.
Oh, yes. The appendices. I'm surprised that made the list. They're very short.
Yeah, but, I might reference them.
Okay. So where are we starting? What's the first thing?
I'd like to start with modes of play.
Modes of play. That's an interesting place to start.
Well, because the next obvious place to start would have been the action economy, but the action economy relates to the modes of play.
Right.
And the modes of play, I think, is the most clear indicator that they know how people play, even if the system never really perfectly reflected how people play.
Mm-hmm.
So the first edition is very much based around minutes and rounds, and just in the broad sense. And technically, you could cast a spell with a 1 hour casting time in the middle of combat. It's a bad idea, but you can do it, whereas now things are divided up a little bit more evenly, not as rigidly as they were in 4th edition, which had a similar idea of sometimes you're in encounters, or it's your powers. Some of them are encounter powers, some of them are, I forget the terminology, but they were out of encounter powers.
Right.
Now there's 3 modes of play. encounter mode,
Right.
which is the most familiar kind, and it's defined as a lot is happening in a very short amount of time. Exploration mode is much wider, where it's not as specific. You are mostly trying to find things, trying to determine things. It's a lot of research, a lot of going places, and the time frame is a lot more nebulous. It could take you a couple of hours. It could take you random number of hours.
Right. This is you going through the dungeon. This is you going across the land.
Right. That old joke of Dungeons & Dragons and Pathfinder by extension, where a 5-minute combat takes 3 hours of play, but a 10-hour journey takes 5 minutes at the table.
Right. And that doesn't change here.
No, it's just a little more codified. And then finally there's downtime, which I very much appreciate is the simplest of the three systems. It is the time when you are not doing anything specific related to your adventuring career. You just get to do the things that you do when you're not an adventurer, because you've probably got hobbies.
Right.
Maybe you've got a side business. Or maybe you do craft weapons, or you do craft things for the purpose of adventuring, but it's not adventuring when you're crafting weapons.
You can have a hobby now.
You can. What I like about the downtime system is that exploration and encounter mode each got a couple of pages explaining them, and then encounter mode gets most of this book going into it. Downtime gets a single page.
Yeah.
And it really is simple. If you compare it to downtime in first edition, which was rules to the point of obnoxiousness and against its own goals.
It was half of Ultimate Campaign. It got half a hardcover.
Really, half of it?
Yeah.
Wow. I know it was a big chunk.
Well, because they wrapped up kingdom building was part of downtime, and like
That's
all
true.
this, and retraining is part of downtime, and all that stuff is just, and none of that's here. And some of that is because it's been simplified in this version, and some of that is that we have to acknowledge that this is a playtest document, and there are obvious sections where it is just like asterisk, more to come here soon.
So what I like about downtime as it's written here is that it very much reflects the downtime issues I've had at my game. Usually, the scenario when people are working with downtime is Corey would want to craft a magic item for somebody, which would take days or weeks.
Right.
And then everyone else would be like, all right, I'm going to follow up on this lead or catch up with this character that had an interesting backstory or whatever. And suddenly
That's
there's
not
a hook,
downtime.
and suddenly there's an adventure, and suddenly Corey can't craft his magic item. So now it's very much, that guy's going to be doing his crafting thing. Here's your time frame. Pick a thing you could do in this time frame. You're not going to have a conversation at the bar, but you could be just hanging at the bar, and you will have a broad bonus of like raising your reputation in the city or whatever. It's a lot of like, take this as a big chunk of time where nothing's going to happen. Don't try and make something happen.
You're furiously paging through the broadsheets, wondering what happened to the one-armed man.
Exploration mode is a simplified version
Of what?
There was just a major lag there. Can we just do a sound text?
Okay.
When I say make some, you say noise. Make some.
Noise.
Yeah, that was like 5 or 6 seconds.
Oh, goodness. And I'm getting reds again, but it's recovering.
Okay.
Okay. Make some.
Noise.
Make some.
Noise.
Ooh, boy. We've got some major lag right now.
Okay. How are we dealing with it? You want to give it another 5 seconds?
Yeah, I think we're good. I think we're good to go. The connection's green again.
Yeah, and you were responding to me pretty well. So, make some.
Noise.
Make some.
Noise.
We're good.
Yeah, we're good. Chill.
Exploration mode is
I need my
a
second.
nice new... Oh, sorry.
Exploration mode.
Exploration mode is a nice codification of probably the vaguest of terms from the original book. There was no real thing between when you're adventuring, when you're not adventuring. Whereas now there is an understanding that, yes, you are going to be doing things that are less specific. You don't need to be looking at every single corner of every room. You just need to explore the dungeon, and you are going to be doing it with a certain tactic instead of rolling stealth before every door and whatever. Now it's just, all right, you're exploring the dungeon. How are you going to be exploring it? Stealth? All right, stealth check. You are going to be like eyes and ears open? Fine, perception check. And you go with basically a single skill check to reflect the tactic that the person is employing when they're in this less specific, slightly broader, but still potentially dangerous situation.
And I think I like the tactics because it does define things that are very specific. It's like, unless you have this qualifying ability, when you are doing the slow check for traps mode, you do not have your weapons out, because that would make it almost impossible for you to accomplish that task. So it's not like you're always at Schrodinger's Adventurer at the perfect peak performance of any given task that's asked of you at that moment.
And if you're riding a horse, when the encounter starts, you're still on that horse.
Mm-hmm.
Then finally, we've got encounter mode, which, like I said, takes up most of the book. And so we're not really going to really talk about it in the context of a mode of play. Just know that's combat. That's where the things are happening.
Mm-hmm.
And those things are defined by the new action economy rules.
Yes. I think this is the thing everybody that's touched the playtest, including myself, like the most about the playtest. This is the biggest change that has the most positive impact on the game.
Now, it has some lineage, so it might be familiar to some people. Can you go into some of the history of this version of the action economy for Pathfinder?
Well, this version of the action economy, called the 3-action system, was introduced in the Pathfinder Unchained hardcover as an alternate way of handling your encounters, in which everybody gets 3 actions and 1 reaction every turn. That doesn't change. That's true for first level, that's true for 20th level. And almost everything is then redefined as an action or a number of actions. There's not a distinguishing between a move action, a swift action, a full action. It's just all actions. So moving is an action. A 5-foot step is an action. Drawing your weapon is an action. Swinging your sword and beating up a goblin is an action. Casting a spell or using a class power, 2 actions.
The game does define several basic actions starting on page 307, and virtually all of them are a single action. And these are things that absolutely anybody can do. It's nice, clean, it's comprehensive. Aid is probably the only one that's complicated, and funny enough, it's also the one that comes first. Aid is listed as a free action, but it's actually a reaction to the ready action going off, which is the only action that's 2 actions. So we will skip aid and ready beyond what I've just said, but otherwise you've got assisting someone, which is the combat version of aid. Normally, in first edition, aid was I am helping with skill or I am helping with an attack or defense. Now it's broken into aid is just skills, assist is getting the person's attention, just trying to badger them, trying to hamper them so that it is easier for your ally to hit. And it's nice and open-ended, so there will probably be a couple of skills or a couple of checks that you're mainly going to be focusing on, but you've got a little bit of flexibility as the GM to implement what the player wants, and as a player, you've got a little bit of tactical flexibility.
And let's take a look at that assist ability. If you could, go ahead and read through the success conditions, because this is another aspect of the system, and this is our first chance to actually start talking about it. Because when you're using the assist, you can help your friend. You can screw it up.
So one thing that's important to note is that success or failure is always based on who is making the roll. So in a lot of spells, a failure will be good because it means they failed their save. In this case, it is the person that is assisting that is making the check. So a success is what you're looking for. That sounds a little bit like second edition Dungeons and Dragons, in it sometimes you want high, sometimes you want low. I'm not sure if that's going to be something they reverse to clarify, but for the reading of it, it reads a little strangely until you kind of get in the system of how to read this new rulebook. So, success. Creature takes no damage. Instead, you either impose a -2 circumstance penalty to the enemy's attack roll against your chosen ally, or you grant your chosen ally +2 circumstance bonus to attack rolls against your chosen enemy. You choose which effect you create. The penalty or bonus lasts until the start of your next turn. A critical success, which means rolling a natural 20 or succeeding over the opponent's AC by 10 or more, as a success, but the penalty is -4 and the bonus is +4. But here's what you were talking about, Param. A critical failure. Your chosen enemy either gains a +2 circumstance bonus to attack rolls against your chosen ally, or your chosen ally takes a -2 penalty to attack rolls against the chosen enemy. Your enemy decides which of these effects occur. Penalty lasts until the start of your next turn.
And for those of you who have been listening to No Direction Adventurous lately, knows that we've already unknowingly started using that version of the rule system.
We good moving on?
Yeah. Sorry, I just wanted to call that out because this is the first time it comes up.
Sure, no problem. All right, crawl. Crawl is nice, cleanly defined. You are moving 5 feet if you are prone.
Yeah.
If you have a speed of at least 10 feet. This is already something that was in, or a lot of times people that were prone in my first edition games were asking if they could take a 5-foot crawl and count it as a 5-foot step. So it's clearly defined here. It's like, no, this is moving. Not that 5-foot steps are much of a thing anymore anyway, but that was an option. Delaying is a free action where you are just moving down the initiative order.
Right.
It works basically the same way. Drop means drop an item held. It's free action. Drop prone is when you are falling to the ground, and that actually takes an action.
Right. And there's another thing I want to point out, because you just talked about things that were very informal in first edition. Part of the rules, how they were handled were just sort of implied or briefly stated. Here, it put it in the action stat block, a very specific, discrete action of choice that you can make during the encounter, and exactly what happens. Whereas before, this would usually be a tagline on something else that might be somewhat related to it. You're going to see a lot of that throughout this entire document, where they very specifically outline all of these limits of your choices.
And I am going to say that when it comes to updating something that was nebulous in first edition and codifying it for second edition, that is the strength. One thing that we're going to get into is that when it takes something that was codified well in first edition, it tends to get really weirdly technical in second edition.
Yes.
That you don't see that here in the basic actions, because most of the basic actions are the first thing I just described. I'm also going to mention there are a couple of traits to all of these actions, and these are important for when you're looking at reactions. So drop as in dropping an item is manipulate.
Right.
Drop prone is a move. Crawl is a move. So if somebody's reaction is, if someone near you does an action with the move trait, then this is how you get to react to it. And so you know that crawl and drop prone both count, because they're both listed as moves. They're not move actions, but for things that happen when someone else moves, these both count.
And the manipulate trait means that it provokes reactions.
Well, I mean, they could all technically provoke reactions. It depends on the reaction.
Oh yeah, but the manipulate trait is called out specifically as something that can provoke most reactions. And without it usually means you're safe from things like attack of opportunity.
Another action that is a manipulate action is one of my favorites, because this is showing you that you can codify something that is loosely defined, and you can have a well-defined, loosely defined rule. So interact is basically things that are manipulate that don't fall under most under categories. Opening a door, picking up a jar from the table, something that's not actually a weapon or whatever. I believe there's a couple of reactions. Yeah, manipulating an object, or like if you're pulling the rope on a well, things that will happen, things that when a player scans the terrain is like, can I do this? Odds are they are interacting with something. Leap is jumping. Ready is what we were talking about earlier. You're readying an action, and then it triggers. You're basically giving yourself a new reaction. Seek is when you're actively looking for unseen or hidden creatures, and this is something I very much enjoy, because whenever there's an invisible creature or just something's not quite right, players, and again in my first edition experience, would often say like, well, can I just focus on it? And there's no real, there's the perception check or not a perception check. There's no way of spending actions to increase that perception check or whatever. So seek is something that is something players have always wanted to do, and now they can very specifically. Stand is clear. Step is your 5-foot step. So this is a different form of movement that might not trigger what other trigger reactions like other movement types. Stride is moving your speed, and I like that. I like that they separated the word move from movement, because that caused some confusion in first edition. Striking is attacking, and again, there's a lot of things in first edition. I still don't know if when it says it's an attack, if it's talking about specifically the attack action or anything offensive.
Right, especially because it's not consistent. There are lots of asterisks in errata documents that don't completely line up.
Take cover is nice, and and that's the last one. So those are the basic actions.
Yeah. They nerfed cover. They nerfed the heck out of cover.
All right, what's your problem with cover? I didn't really mind change.
Oh, I don't mind it. I'm just saying cover ain't what it used to be unless you actually take the take cover action to make it what it used to be.
well, take cover is kind of like the shield. It feels like spending a little bit of your flexibility, which are your 3 actions, which is extremely flexible. You can now spend some to gain some small benefits here and there, and that's like actually one of the perfect examples of, if you are in the scene, if you're thinking like your character is thinking, and you're like, well, can't I just do this? Now you can, and it usually costs a single action.
Hold up, Ryan.
Okay. But why?
We have red. Like, we have bad red.
We have bad red and a patient audience.
We have a very patient... We have the best audience. You guys
Thank you, audience.
are amazing. We love you. Much like our recorder loves you. Our recorder loves everyone.
I didn't know what you were talking about for a second. I've got leveling up here in the gameplay and system. I don't know why.
All right, it looks like it's green again, so give me the 5 seconds for the edit point.
Okay.
And I'm going to hate myself today. And let's go.
Something that I appreciate is... Oh, there we go. The proficiency modifiers.
Oh, boy.
I
Okay.
like that this is...
Oh, sorry.
Was that an, oh boy, you have content? Or oh boy, we have
Go.
problem?
You talk, or I'm going to override you.
Okay. Something I really like is how streamlined the proficiency modifiers have become. I know there's some people that are arguing that the untrained doing a -2 penalty is annoying because they feel like the baseline should be no penalty and then it should just go up from there.
Right.
But ignoring the numbers, I like that this applies almost universally. If you are slightly trained at something, whether it's skills, attacks, whatever, you are just plain old good at it. If the better you get at it, the more this bonus goes up. And it's actually a very narrow field of -2 to +5.
Okay. I think we should explain that fully for anybody that's not familiar with it. So in Pathfinder 2E Playtest Awesomeness Edition, you have what is called your proficiency modifier to pretty much every one of your rolls and every one of your stats. It is calculated from your level gets added to everything. That's part of your proficiency modifier, and it's plus your actual proficiency skill that Ryan was talking about. And not just skills. This applies to your saving throws, to your weapon attacks, to it also applies to your perception, which isn't a skill anymore. How good you are at spellcasting. You have this 5-point rank system that starts at untrained, which is at -2, like he said. So if you aren't trained in doing something specifically, you still roll at level -2 plus relevant attribute or ability score. And when you have trained, it's at no penalty. Expert is at +1, master is +2, and legendary is +3. So the difference between completely untrained is only 5 points away from awesome as it gets.
Yeah, and I misspoke earlier. I said it's -2 to 5, but no, it's -2 to 3, which is a range of 5.
Yeah.
And what I like especially is that it applies to everything. So if we're talking about attacks, you may have the rogue who's really good with the dagger, the fighter's right next to him, also good with that dagger, but also good with this big axe that the rogue just cannot compare to. So it got rid of base attack bonus. This is one of the ways they replaced it, and the fact that it's the same system as skills, and just seems to apply to everything as easily, like as smoothly. I haven't seen any one element of it where I'm like, well, that's an awkward use of this proficiency system. No, this proficiency system is elegant. It's nice. It's I'm already comfortable with it.
It's great. It's 4th edition.
Is it?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. I've heard a lot of 4th edition comparisons. I never heard this one.
Yeah. Well, 4th edition uses half level, but same concept.
Okay. Now, one of the ways it applies is specifically to skills. How skills work is quite different from how we are used to. It reminds me a lot of the alpha playtest of 1st edition version of skills, which is that instead of putting in all of these very like point-based skill things where you are just like you can apply it universally across the board with some built-in advantages based on your class representing your passive training. This is much more passive. You do not have as much control over what you are good at. You can do almost anything, but with a -2 penalty plus your bonus. But you can be very good at a few things. I'm still not sure about this.
Okay.
It was described as a gated system in chat by someone that I've missed the comment. So whoever said it, thank you. I really like that terminology. I just feel like I went from these are all the options. These are things I can focus on. These are some things that I only need to put a little bit of work into, like swim and climb tend to be the things that I would put 1 point into because the penalty for not having that point was quite large. And then I could still focus on the things that I really want to be good at, usually the knowledge, skills, and perception.
Right. And
I didn't like that system. What I didn't like about that system is that there were some that really, at a certain point, there was no point in advancing them. But I know one of the complaints about that system is that people really just picked the one or the few skills that they maxed out and ignored everything else, and that was never my experience. And this new system solves a problem I never experienced.
Right. What this new system does is it allows you get a fair amount of choice actually, because you get a number of skill proficiency ranks that you can use to learn a new skill and get it trained, or later on you use those to either get a new skill trained or raise the rank of a skill up a point. So there is still that aspect of the game exists, but it's such a bigger investment. Deciding that you want your wizard to know athletics is a huge investment now. It's a major choice that you are not raising the rank of one of your more wizardy related skills. You are intentionally going towards this other off-brand skill, and that will now advance and be a significant chunk of your character for its entire development going forward.
They've combined a lot of skills. They've simplified the skill system down to 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17. So there's 17 total skills, but that includes all knowledges.
Right.
Whereas before there was practically 17 knowledges on their own.
Right.
So some have been combined, some have just become actions on their own. And some, and this is interesting, is trained versus untrained is different. Every skill has a certain amount of untrained options. Then there's some that are trained only uses. But some of these, it's not trained as in these are one of your, I'm forgetting the terminology, but when you take it as a class.
Signature skills?
Not that. The other thing you do as a class for your skill. Oh, it is trained. Okay, sorry. I was assuming it was a new term. So some of it's trained, and some of them are unlocked with your skill feats. And we will get into how skill feats work in a second.
And that's important to call, because being good at something isn't just the number check anymore. They're like, you get special actions and abilities that you just are not allowed to use unless you have the rank and skill that high. For instance, everybody can stabilize somebody with the medical skill or healing skill. What's it called again this time? Starfinder. Medicine. Yes. Starfinder is confusing me because it's very similar to its stat squish, where they made a lot of the same combinations. So the medicine skill, everybody can stabilize with it now. But if you are trained in it, now you can start like removing diseases with it. And then there's other things you can take as skill feats later that starts letting you heal hit points.
I also appreciate that the more physical a skill, the more untrained uses there are. So acrobatics and athletics, anybody can do most of the things you can use them for. But things like arcana, things that are a little more abstract, the only free thing you can do with arcana is think about what you know about magic. When you're trained in it, you can start doing some fun things.
I think I saw a wizard do that once.
And so that tends to be the knowledge ones, where what before was a knowledge skill slash use magic device or knowledge skill slash survival is now untrained. You just have some, like, you have information.
Right.
But trained, you know what to do with it.
And to give an example of how extreme the top end goes, one of the legendary thievery things you can learn to do is you can steal writing from pages.
cool.
That's
And
a skill
then-
feat that you unlock that with.
IMN for Life in chat brought up the lore skill. I like lore very much because lore is pretty similar to knowledge as it was in first edition, except that lore is very broadly defined. Lore is a thing you know about, and so instead of it being knowledge arcana or knowledge, one of the preset knowledges, now if I want to actually know about royalty, I can say I know the royalty lore, and so whenever we're talking with a king or whatever, I can gossip about all the things that them and their lineage has done.
And lore also doubles as a lot of the profession skill.
That's true. I hadn't thought of it that way, but yes, you're very much right.
Like one of the examples of that is lore gladiatorial knowledge. So you know about tournament structures and how to bandage wounds in a gladiator thing, and like just all the stuff about how gladiatorial arenas are functioned, and then you can roll that as your downtime day job roll to earn money.
And I know that the backgrounds just kind of add some different types of lore.
Yeah,
the warrior lore has
yeah.
the warfare lore skill.
Yeah, every background gets one lore skill. So we're going to talk about this in the future, but there's now what they're called the ABCs of character creation. Ancestry, which is what they've reframed race, the previous concept of race into, and we'll talk more about that later. And the backgrounds are basically what your character did before they were an adventurer. This is what their job was, what their study was, what, you know, it's their background. And now you can choose it. This is like Starfinder, but instead of having 7 like Starfinder has, you have 20 in this book alone, and they already said there's going to be more when this thing actually comes out.
So we are going to get to that soon, and I'm going to talk about the character that I created just to test out the character creation system. There's a couple of things I think we can just rapid fire through.
Okay.
Feats. Feats are now your catch-all for options. So
Yes.
your race or your ancestry has feats. Skills are increased through feats. Your class gets feats. There are general feats that reflect the things adjacent to your class or the other things that you want to do.
You get a feat literally every level.
Equipment and magic items. So their roles have kind of switched. Well, maybe not switched. A lot of what magic items were in first edition is now equipment. Equipment is now a lot more nuanced. There is a lot of small things you can do. There is a reason to take a weapon, one weapon versus another, besides just its category and damage. And there's a reason to switch between different weapons in combat. I know that the golf bag of weapons was kind of was seen as a bad thing, but at least now it'll be, you've got your main weapon and you've also got a couple of handy weapons in case you need to switch it up, or if you manage to get your hands on something that's just lying around in a dungeon, you can incorporate it differently than you would your normal queue of weapons. Whereas magic items, sorry, go ahead.
And the class options kind of support that. There's not a whole lot of very specific, you are good at this very specific, like you are good at rapiers. There's not a lot of that anymore. It's a lot of, you are good at martial weapons, or you are good at this broad category of weapons. So it does encourage you to have several different weapons to take advantage of that system. Whereas in Pathfinder 1, the game really rewarded you of pick one exact weapon, and you're stuck with that. And if your GM ever disarms you, you're screwed until you get your sword back.
Oh, and if you ever find a very awesome magic item that's, not the weapon you use, well, that's going to the shop.
Right.
Because you are a sword guy, not even just a sword guy, you are a cutlass guy, and this is a broadsword. I'm sorry, you have no use for that.
No.
The weapon traits are extensive, and that's a lot of how the weapon-related feats work, because agile, backstabber, backswing, all of these things show how the weapon is used, and then the options that are related to it is like, here's your backswing weapons, here's something you can do extra with backswing weapons specifically.
And I like that. It means that there is, when you see, it's going to be very important for GMs now to describe what weapons the orcs are using, because the tactics of that fight change significantly if they have pole arms compared to if they have hatchets.
It also gives the fighter their version of spellcraft checks. So you can just start as a GM saying, like, here's a bunch of axe-wielding orcs. And then the fighter could be like, what kind of axe? What are we talking about here? And you can roll your lore or something related to that so you can narrow it down and figure out what the traits are.
So somebody besides the cleric and the wizard, like, spouting off Hermione style?
Yes,
Awesome.
but they're spouting off about the cool weapons that they're about to get stabbed with.
Oh, well, slightly less awesome.
Then we've got magic items, which are practically like artifacts. Not all
Mhm.
of them, but the role in the universe has very much changed. Magic items are rare, using them is hard, and it costs resonance.
Oh boy.
How do you feel about
Man.
resonance, Param?
Man, that is a very complicated topic that I have very complex and varied feelings on.
Let's
Not
start with
all of them positive.
let's start with conceptually. Do you like the idea that magic items use up some personal essence, some personal connection you have with them?
When it does work, it can feel very cool. There is a hammer, and I forget its name. They showed it off during the banquet. That when this hammer hits something and you roll a crit, then you're allowed to pop off a resonance, and then a freaking fireball just goes off. Or when you're using your cloak of Elvenkind and you can pop a resonance off and you just become straight up invisible. That is when the resonance system really feels cool. I mean, and the idea that you're binding these very powerful magic items to you, these don't feel like the spine items, the big five that we used to have to use all the time. These feel like choices on how your character is going to behave. It's almost as important as what feat or spell you chose. Choosing to invest one of your residence points in one of these magic items is a meaningful decision that has ramifications in the middle of most fights if you choose to use them. And that's when it feels great. That's when this resonance system works. It just doesn't always work.
I recently heard Stephen Radley McFarlane on the Roll for Combat podcast. They did
Right,
a rare
yes.
interview, and he talks about how the resonance system and the magic item systems were actually developed separately and then combined. And he admits that one of the first things they will be reviewing will be how those two different systems interact. Because I believe it even says early on, it defines the items that are most likely to use resonance. I believe they're supposed to have the investment trait. I'm having trouble finding it for some reason. But then some of the items that actually do cost resonance shouldn't cost resonance based on how resonance use was defined earlier in the book.
And I think the one rallying item and the one that kind of like, specifically, lots of us have, and very shortly we're going to release an article that's not just, because mine and Ryan's opinions on this book are very important to you all, but all of our network members have opinions. We could not have a 14-member cast show. That would be madness. And many people wanted to be on this show, and we couldn't have everybody, so it's just me and Ryan. But we didn't want to throw those opinions away. So we're going to be releasing an article. By the time you're listening to this on the stream, it will likely be up. That is everybody's broad initial thoughts on the system.
Oh, I got a page check. Thank you, Crypt Walker. He's saying invested is on page 416.
But
So I was in the right chapter. It's
Yeah.
just later on than I thought.
But where I was going with that is one of the common things that we talked about is we all have our personal hill to die on, and there's two that could possibly be my hill to die on, and one of them is the example of resonance gone wrong that's being bandied around the forums right now, and it's the bag of holding, which is under the new system as written is just a mockery of what it is supposed to be, because the bag of holding does not have the invested trait, but it has the operate action, which means you have to spend an action, and it's written super vaguely that you can tell that this was not intentional, maybe, but you can't be rules have written any other way, that basically putting an item in the bag or taking it out cost you one of your very precious resonance points. And resonance points are their solution to charisma as a dump stat, because your resonance points are equal to your character's level plus your charisma bonus, which makes a lot of sense because that's always been the innate magical property stat for Pathfinder. That's what sorcerers and bards and some paladins even tap into for their spellcasting ability. And it's always the natural inborn talent, so it would make sense that is your natural inborn talent to power this hammer of fireballing. But it sure does, it feels cool when you're hammering something down with fireball hammer, and it really does not feel cool when you're using it to take your rations out.
An interesting thing about the bag of holding. Okay, the bag of holding then relates to the new bulk rules, which takes away a lot of the nitty gritty of managing your inventory.
Yeah.
It's
bulk rules
instead
are
of specific
great.
poundage. Yeah. So it really narrows it down to, here's a thing, it weighs this much, it's about this size, so it's one bulk. And you've got a certain amount of bulk.
Yeah, you have bulk that
But-
is 5 plus your strength bonus.
But that nitty gritty has now been moved to magic items. And magic items are a thing that only happens later in the game. So it's gone from something that you just do pretty much all throughout the adventure to, oh, you've reached this certain plateau of your career. Now get the books out. There's a lot more paperwork because now you've got the cool magic items. And it feels like that's going against the feeling you want from high level play.
Yeah. And it's also super ironic when we rally around the bag of holding as the example of it going wrong, because the bag of holding was the item you went to escape the encumbrance system. This is the thing that you went to say, this is too complicated, I don't like resource management, I don't like handling weight in inventory, I'm just going to invest a significant chunk of my money to opt out. And now they took the thing that you opt out and made it the epitome of everything that's wrong with the current system. Oh, you're not opting out of this. No, you're going to deal with it. You're going to deal with it, and if you try, we're going to punish you for it.
All right, Param, let's talk about something that I know is near and dear to your heart. How do spells work
Okay.
in the playtest?
Okay, so that's a complicated question. So there's two answers to that. First is they've taken all the spells and divided them into 4 spell lists straight off the bat. And you no longer have class-specific spell list. A class just says, I use that spell list. And the 4 spell lists are the 2 we're familiar with, the arcane list and the divine list. But now they're adding to that the nature list or primal list, which is druids are the epitome caster of that list, and the occult list. And the occult list, which you might have been familiar with the occult adventures, it does have a lot of parallels there. But the new paragon of the occult list is the bard, which might be a double take, but it actually works. And with how they've framed it up, because they have altered it a bit from what we used to know. It's no longer quite the Penny Dreadful thing it used to be. But that's the 4 possible spell lists. And so wizards are the arcane casters, clerics are the divine casters, druids are the primal casters, and bards are the occult casters. And then sorcerer plays fast and loose with all of them.
And if you want to know more about why the bard is the occult caster, you can listen to our interview with Mark Seifter from last episode. He goes very much into the decision-making that went there and actually got me very excited about that decision.
Yeah, it makes sense when you read it, because it's all about, this is the emotions and the mind-affecting stuff and the esoteric knowledge, and that really is what bard does. That's exactly a bard. I mean, it's not quite making your head explode. I don't imagine bards doing a lot of that. But when we do get to our psychic, it will make sense when they start making heads explode.
And if you look at the bard spell list plus the bard's powers, you can see how if somebody else gets access to the occult list, like people in chat, oh, Lauren is suggesting the witch, when it eventually gets added, will have an occult list. That makes sense. But the witch won't feel like a bard just because she has access to the occult list, because it's the bard's class features and their powers, which are separate from spells, that give that real bard flavor to what they're doing.
But powers are spells. They're just very specific kinds of spells that classes give you instead of spellcasting giving you. And that's a complicated thing. That's a little, and especially, I don't mind it, but they shuffled them together, so it is a little bit weird reading through it. And it's like, this is a power. Well, where did it come from? Don't know.
It's something that was in 2nd edition. There was a distinction between a power that a lot of casters had versus their spells. Cleric's a perfect example where channeling was not a spell. It was a power that they had. And they often got other abilities that used up some of their channeling. But this was a pretty cleric-specific thing, although there were some bard things that used up some of your bardic rounds, but it wasn't being used that way. So this is another time when they were like, we're doing all of these little systems here that work the exact same way. Can we just have one system that applies to it all? So now all casters have powers versus spells.
Right, and the powers are usually fueled through either unique things to that power, like the clerics and their channeling, or they use spell points, which is the unique. I don't like the name, but the concept is the same. This is your pool of points to use your powers with, and powers automatically scale with your level, so they upscale like some of the spells do, which is a point I'll get to. Also, all the spells is the other important thing. All of the spellcasters are on the same spellcasting track, so they get the same number of spell points per day at the same level. It's not spell points, spell slots. That's why I don't like that word. They get the same number of spell slots per level and advance at the same rate for all 5 of the primary spellcasters introduced in this book. So there's not a half caster. There's not a 6 level caster. There's no 4 level casters. There's just 10 level casters. Yes, I said 10.
Go on.
Okay, so basically, if you remember the old wizard progression or the cleric progression, that's now everybody's progression. At every odd numbered level, you get your new level of spells, and at every even number of levels, you get extra spell slots to the top level spell you have. And everybody either has 2 slots because it's your highest, or 3 because that's the max you get in any given spell level, all the way down the tree. So it's basically like 2, then 3, then 2, then 3, then 2, then 3, then 2, then 3, all the way up and down. And that's all everybody gets, except I'm kind of lying, because every single class besides Bard has a way to get extra spell slots tacked on to that are very specific. Either they're domain spells for the clerics, or there's school spells for wizards, bloodline spells for sorcerers, and so on.
Is it literally every single casting class except for the Bard?
Yes, it's except Bard.
Oh, wow. Feel bad for the Bard. I have a feeling that wasn't
Well,
intentional.
the Bard gets performances instead. They get their bardic performances, and that's a much more robust power than the others get. Usually the others get just the equivalent of an extra cantrip, except for sorcerers. Sorcerers also get like these really bloodline powers that beef up, but like cleric, druid, and wizard just basically get the equivalent of an extra cantrip. And the Bard gets bardic performances, which are really souped up compared to the baseline powers that the other classes get. Plus, the Bard is still better at actual fighting than the others, because it still gets to be the Bard and swashbuckle, whereas the others are pretty much casty. In fact, cleric is extra casty, and you have to make extra effort to make it smack bad guys again. Cleric.
Since you're mentioning the cleric, Squeezebox9 has a question. With monsters doing a lot more damage and hit more often, do you think the game requires a party to have a cleric?
I'm really worried about that, because of the decision they made with the resonance system. To back it up, one of the justifications for the resonance system was to get rid of Cure Light Wounds spam, which, if you've listened to this podcast long enough, you know the concept of the happy stick, because one of the most efficient ways to keep your party healed is to buy a Cure Light Wounds wand and just spam it between combats. They cost a lot for first level characters, but not so much that they can pull their funds and get one. And by the time that you've used that one up, you've probably level 3 or 4, and then just buying another one of those is nothing. And then the high level, you probably just have like a scroll case stuffed full with them. They look like Pocky sticks. And I understand the disincentive why they like some people don't like that, because it's super metagamey. Like, it really is super metagamey. But so is the giant resonance system tacked onto the game. That's really metagamey too. But one of the things it did allow was that cleric is the only class, well, except for some very specific specializations and archetypes of Oracle and later came out for the game, that is healing focused. And in the playtest, this is extra true. It is very difficult because they limited the number of spell slots compared to previous editions. Your high intelligence, your high wisdom, your high charisma don't give you bonus spell slots anymore like it did in the game. And it's really hard to get them now. And using scrolls, the old tactic to make your spells infinite, uses resonance. So that's not infinite anymore. So healing costs a lot. It's an investment. And the cleric is the only class that just has this giant pool of healing to get you through the day. Damage is higher. You have a lot more hit points, so you need that healing somehow. And the old solution was, well, none of us have a cleric, but Bard can cast Cure Light Wounds, right? So, and usually somebody in your party could do it, or could get enough ranks in Use Magic Device to automatically pass the check to just use the Wand of Cure Light Wounds. And it didn't force this religious healing character with a lot of baggage on your party and force somebody to play it. And as the playtest is written right now, I'm worried that that's the case again. I really hope that that's just because this is a playtest and that thought gets worked out, because there needs to be an option for keeping a party going without having very specifically a cleric, if for no other reason than it's bad game design to have one class be mandatory for every single party going, and it's also a class that has a lot of baggage that not every player is going to be comfortable with bringing on.
How's the Alchemist as an alternate healer?
Not great, because the Alchemist is in a bad place right now.
Oh, we'll talk about classes in a minute. I guess we should just finish up talking about the system, then we get to character creation. We can talk about specific things like that. We've been talking about the math. I found that the math, like the balance of things, still feels fairly familiar.
Right.
DCs are still about the same range. The extra hit points you get at first level, now that your Ancestry provides hit points in addition to your class, that feels like first level characters are beefier.
Right.
It doesn't just feel like you get more hit points, but you take more damage. And I know that who was it? Squeezebox9 said that monsters are doing more damage, but the rules also call out there are minions. That's going to be a more important part of the game, and minions get fewer actions. They only get 2 actions.
Right.
And so I feel like you won't be getting that much more damage until you're actually fighting the main bosses. Once again, saying I haven't read the bestiary, but we have played in a playtest where we've taken damage, and I never quite felt like I was totally threatened by it.
I've played significant amount of the game by now. Not high level stuff. I did screw around with some level 5 stuff, just see what that would be like, but I haven't gone like into the teens yet. But for those level 1s and level 5s, the damage output isn't really more than I expect from Pathfinder 1, and I play a lot of Pathfinder with Between Society and their home games. The monsters are, I think people don't respect how deadly first, second level monsters can be in Pathfinder. That orc, straight from the bestiary, can just flat out murder most characters on a hit. And they're still doing that. And yeah, they're getting in some extra attacks, but I find that the delta is just not as extreme. So maybe they are dealing slightly more damage just because of the fact that they can get in more attacks each round. But there were always monsters that could do that straight away in Pathfinder, in the first edition of Pathfinder. And the extra hit points do feel like it's a padding. It is also important to know that this is just extra hit points at first level. You're still going to gain normal amounts of hit points per level that you're used to. It's just an extra bump to start with. It does not make... you do not get a huge amount of extra hit points throughout your career. It's just 10 to 20 extra to begin with.
We've had chat bring up some really interesting points and a counter to my argument. Apparently the minion rules are mostly for animal companions and summoned monsters.
Yes.
That you're not going to have a bunch of, like, goblins won't be minions. So I misunderstood how that was going to be used. But I believe it was the Bard Wannabe said that healing is the boring part. Let people have interesting characters and healing wands. Man, that is just a really strong, simple argument.
Yeah, and I agree with that argument, because I'm looking at the alternative here, and I remember the game before the Happy Sticks, and, I mean, people hate the Happy Stick, but it meant that players got to play the characters they wanted to play. And if that meant that I have a little bit of being pulled out of things between fights as everybody just sucks down the Cure Light Wounds wand, then so be it. I mean, it might as well be Capri Suns for all I care. The fact that my players are having fun at my table is much more important than that tiny little call-out would cause me.
Next point on talking about the system, and we're going to get to this more when we talk about presentation and order of information, I suspect. But for now, let's talk about the language.
Oh, I bet you're trying to talk about very specific language like keywords, right?
Keywords, traits, and just some sentences that don't sound like English. because of the way they are incorporating a rule version of a existing word. Like, to me, a role-playing game, the rules should be written like you are talking to a person in that world, and every now and then take a second to say, but when I say that, this is what I mean. This is how the dice relate to that sentence. Once the sentence starts reading like a VCR manual, then it's like, I know these words, but that sentence makes no sense.
And they're very algorithmic language, and I don't think that's an accident. When I'm examining this book, I'm noticing that they've made changes to the math, changes to the formula for actions, changes to the presentation of data that is super standardized, and lots of tags. This is a system that is designed from the ground up to be converted into an electronic format. This is meant to be computer readable. I strongly believe that this was designed to be computer readable.
And you don't just think that a game engine is a game engine, and this is just trying to be more of an engine than
This is going...
Like, we've been talking a lot about the looseness of first edition rules at times.
It could be a coincidence, but I don't think it's a coincidence. But then this is just my speculation, just from my experience in working with converting D20 stuff to computers. Because, you know, I made Param's Spellbook, I made the NPC gallery, I made several things that tie into the actual, that literally took text from game, turned into program. And that was very difficult because it was very much not computer friendly in the original 3.5.3.0 OGL version of the game. And this is the changes I would make if I wanted to make computer interpretation of this game super easy.
Param, I've got a metaphor that I'm pretty happy with.
Yes.
Right now, the game is showing its rivets.
Oh.
So you see these silver things that are on every G.I. Joe's joints? Those are the rivets. They are mandatory. They hold the whole thing together, and they hurt the illusion that this is a little person with an arm and with a blue sleeve and whatever, and with, you know, skin, even though he's got this silver stud. So that's what I'm seeing right now. I am seeing too much rivet for me to accept this guy as a soldier. Okay, not for me to accept it. I can see myself playing this game. I have played this game. It's just that when I'm reading it, it reads like I am reading something with rivets.
Yeah. When I play, you mentioned the thing, when we have played this game, and we have played this game together several times, it feels like we're playing Pathfinder. Like when we have a character sheet in front of us and we're actually engaged in the game, it just feels like a Pathfinder Society session for all I'm considering. Like, I'm making really neat decisions, but I'm making Pathfinder-esque decisions, and it just feels like the game. But you're right. Reading this book, it feels like a system. This feels like a game. It almost feels like I'm reading a Fantasy Flight board game manual.
Now, Lauren in chat is suggesting that maybe it's because it's the playtest book, but the language, the feel of the language for the alpha and beta didn't feel much different from the ultimate core rulebook we got from first edition. This feels like it is a deliberate change in how rules are presented, and that it is supposed to feel more technical.
Okay, hold.
Holding.
Yeah, we need to reboot Skype because you've gone robot.
I've gone robot this time.
Yeah. Well, this is just we've been talking too long on Skype, not.
Oh yes.
Yeah.
We've been talking for a long time here. All right, so I'll shut down and I'll restart Skype and then I'll reconnect.
Yeah, I'm going to still be here. We're not restarting the screen, so just disconnect and we just need to restart the call.
All right, see you in... Really? You don't want me to restart Skype?
Yeah.
Okay, see you in 10 seconds then.
I'm just bringing him back on. This should clear up his audio.
Yeah, that was the fastest 10 seconds ever.
Yeah, it's done.
Still live?
Yeah, we're fine. It's good.
Hello, chat.
I'm going to pull our video back up. Okay. So that's all there was to it. And I think you're right. That's a great G.I. Joe interpretation of it.
Yes.
It's almost as if you really know your Joe.
I do know my Joe. Knowing is half the battle.
What's the other half?
Violence.
Oh, good. We're still playing Pathfinder then.
So, finally, I do want to talk a little bit about GMing.
Okay.
So this is where I'm going to talk a little bit about Doomsday Dawn without spoiling anything, only to say that I have read through the first section of Doomsday Dawn, and it felt almost indecipherable from a first edition adventure. It was just, it's written as, here's the information, here's the rooms, here are the things you're confronting, and only when you start getting to very specific, and here is the math to deal with this encounter, does it then become different from first edition. But unlike other parts of the rulebook where it's like, boy, this feels all mathy and technical and whatever, the adventure does not feel like that. The adventure still feels like an adventure. It feels like this is how you're supposed to engage with your friends and have a good time.
And I agree with that. When I was prepping Rose Street Revenge, it just felt like I was prepping a Pathfinder Society module. I mean, some of the stat blocky stuff was a little bit weird to get used to, and there's a lot of icons. There's so many icons thrown on this game. Glyphography is something they're focusing on. We didn't even touch on the rarity system that's like prevalent through this entire game.
It's true.
Yeah, so we will talk about that in a second. But it just feels like you're prepping a Pathfinder Society. And also, talking about GMing, I want to call out and give kudos to the GMing section of this book when it starts talking about the modes of play, where I was expecting especially because this was a playtest book, for this to just be a phone-in required copy-paste from previous works on that topic, because let's face it, the audience of this is probably people that have been playing Pathfinder for a little while, at least for the people that are jumping on a playtest version of the next version of the game. I mean, Pathfinder 2 will need to bring it, but I wouldn't have faulted them if this was just, yada yada, move on. But they really did a good job of considering really practical aspects of running the game and how you're dealing with common player behavior and choices and what it means. And they do that with this nice little tag on some of the actions called fatiguing. And that fatiguing tag was brilliant. It's like, hey, if your player is going to attempt this strategy, well, that's a fatiguing thing, and there's penalties for doing that. They're going to get tired if they try to do it this way. They can absolutely do it. If you're going to cast Create Water a few 100 billion times, you can go ahead and do it, but that's going to wear you out. And now that's in the rules. Oh, you can absolutely have this one spell channeled constantly and at the ready, but that's going to be fatiguing. Oh, you can absolutely be super paranoid and crawl down this hallway looking for every single trap. That's going to wear you out.
I also really appreciate, another thing about the language of the game mastery section is how chill it is. Like, everything else in the book is like, it's very technical, it's very stat. It's like, when this action is happening, then this is other things happening at the same time. And then the game mastery section is, when you need to do something, just figure out the best way to do it. So, you need a skill check. It doesn't really apply. Find the thing that makes the most sense. Like, it is so, like, just casual and, like, GM to GM conversation, which is so unlike everything else in this book. I appreciate both the tone and the change in tone for that chapter.
Right. Yeah, they really well done. I also like the downtime rules for retraining are now super simple, and I have a suspicion they'll unsuper simple it for the full release, but I kind of wish they stick it super simple. It's this is kind of like a tangent, but it was in that chapter, so that's why I'm bringing it up. When you retrain, first, it's part of the core rulebook. It needs to be, because that is, I feel that retraining is important both for metagame reasons of making sure characters are happy with what they are playing at the table and have a way to undo mistakes that they are not happy with, and it also makes sense in world because people don't always just do the same things they've always done. They learn new ways to do things. They forget ways of, like right now, if I was asked to like code up a Java application again, sure, I used to spend every single day doing that, but I would really need to spend some time going over my books again if I wanted to do that now, because now I work almost entirely in PHP.
In 3rd edition, when we were playing Red Hand of Doom, I made a character that specialized in cometary collision, which was a feat from Complete Warrior, which if somebody is charging you or a member of your party and they get within range of your charge, you can charge them and double your charge bonus.
Oh, that's so cool.
Sounded cool.
That sounded
cool.
cool.
Like, okay, people charge all the time. I'm going to play this. never worked, because you have to ready an action, which means you have to get high enough initiative, and then odds are somebody else in your party will be the one that's charging, and nobody will be charging, and I was just wasting my turn after turn, and I was committed to this feat because there were no retraining rules at the time.
That's when you ask your GM very nicely, and that's how it used to be done. Like a GM would notice a player's not having fun, they would come to him and say, "This spell just sucks," or like, "I took this feat and I never get to use it," or "I didn't understand how it worked," or "It doesn't work with my build at all," and I was going to specialize in rapiers, but you gave me this sweet freaking axe, and it just used to be unofficial. But now it's very it's in part of the game, and it's also super simple. You retraining a feat, a skill, or anything small like that takes a week. Not even money anymore. It used to cost money in first edition Pathfinder. No money exchange. Spend a week of downtime, you can trade that out. It still has to be a legal choice at the time you made the original choice. And that's why the fact that the character sheet has like specific levels for each of the feats you take is going to be super convenient, because you're going to need to know that. And if it's a major thing like a class feature, not a class feat, because most class features are class feats and those will just be a week anyway. But if it's a major class feature, like I'm a divination wizard and I want to go enchantment, that takes a month of downtime. And that's it. That's the whole rules. And it works.
And I am just going to give my GM the benefit of the doubt that if I'd asked, he would have let me. But I think every time it failed to work, I got that much more committed to the time that this will finally work.
I'm sure you can butt heads with the best of them, Ryan.
There was no butting heads. This is me just digging my feet into the ground for no reason. Just being like, commentary collision reads cool. It's going to play cool, damn it.
Oh, yeah. But you were talking about one of the things about the language was the traits, that every single thing seems to have this little box on the side that has the keywords and traits associated with it. I understand why that's super useful, but they mean so much, and that before, for the first edition GM screen, I really wanted all the conditions on there. Now I can imagine the second edition GM screen is just going to be all the traits. There's just too many of them, and they're too specific, and I don't think they're all needed, but in this version of the rules they are, and they rely on them so heavily, and it's not always super obviously what they mean. Like the minion trait, you just screwed it up during the review, and we just read this book. And the manipulate trait we were confused about a minute ago. You didn't know that was specifically the trait that means it provokes. That's exactly what it's for. And there's just literally the GM screen for this game could just be all the traits, and it would be the most useful that GM screen could be.
Darren Caldemeyer says the book has over 160 traits.
That's a problem. I think
Darren Caldemeyer is a man who knows his numbers, especially in the hundreds, so I believe him.
Oh, our PaizoCon correspondent, Darren Caldemeyer.
Yeah, PaizoCon countdown correspondent, Darren Caldemeyer.
Yes, I think that's a big problem with the game. I understand why they wanted to do it, and understand what they want out of it, but I think that this is taking a step in the right direction and then 2 steps back. This is overcomplicating part of the game. This is the new section of the book you're going to be flipping back and forth to constantly, as opposed to where they made actions super simple and bonuses super simple, because there's just the 3 type of bonuses you can get now, and you'll know if they stack because it'll be obvious. But by making all these traits, that is now going to be the annoying thing we're referencing, and I think that they need to seriously cut that back.
Now, Demonic Killer 32 says that some of them are like Goblin or Kobold that don't actually have rules attached to them. So they sort of do, because in the Ancestry chapter, every Ancestry has 2 feats. One is you're very good at your race's weapons, which is what those race traits are. And then one of them is you're especially good at them, basically. So even if it doesn't specifically call out what makes a goblin weapon, you know there are rules that interact specifically with things with that trait.
And because they're all in that same box and there's no differentiating them, it's really hard to tell if it's just something like Goblin that'll matter kind of, or something like Manipulate that's super important all the time.
That's true. Yeah, the one thing... So if you look at prerequisites, everything has a level and everything has prerequisites. And that level is given a completely separate section from the prerequisites, but has no greater weight than any other prerequisite. It's just put there. It's a little clearer to see, but it's still just a prerequisite. And I had to read several times to make sure there was not a greater significance to this not just being a prerequisite. Whereas there are some traits that are major traits, and there are some traits that are just like qualities.
Yeah. Yeah. And I understand why level is often, it's the most important prerequisite. It's the one that you're going to reference the most. It's the one the GM is going to use as a judgment call the most. It's like, oh, that's a level 5 sword. It's about time I give them a level 5 sword. Oh, that's a level 6 dragon. Maybe not yet.
Demonic Killer is suggesting that they do something with the font to differentiate ones that have rules attached to it versus ones that it having this trait means something versus it having this trait, there might be a rule that does something with that.
Right.
He's just bolding it, or he or she. Yeah, that seems like a good way of narrowing it down to the field of important and less important traits.
I think that's important. That might be a way to do it, but I think that the it's not as it's too granular, the scale between the different words, which ones are important, how important, and that would be very difficult to do. And then what happens in a few books down the road where a trait that we used to not, then suddenly there's like 20 feat chains attached to it, and now you need to know it. So I think they just need to workshop the whole system. If some of these are so important that they are that important, they might need to become separate glyphs like they use for actions and stuff. And also, the types of actions is too much. Like I don't think it matters so much that this is a spell is a somatic, verbal action, etc. That matters some of the time, but they pull that out and make it 3 different stamps when they could just go, this is a 3 action thing. By the way, it's somatic, verbal, and material.
I'm going to disagree with that last point. I liked that they gave some rule weight to the somatic and verbal and material components. So I believe we're pretty good with the system. There's a lot of nitpicky things we could be going into more details on, but now let's talk about the options and how character creation works.
One thing I want to touch on is the math before we leave it, because I think that's the biggest one. Besides the actions and how the action system for the encounters, I think the fact that they are tightening the math, because we briefly talked about the math, but it's super important you realize what they just did. Because you're adding your level to everything, both your attacks and your defenses, it means that level actually means nothing. It just matters if you're fighting something that is equal level to you, then your levels cancel each other out. So only your bonuses matter. So a +1 bonus is worth just as much at level 1 as it is at level 20. It's that important, and that's why they're so much smaller. That's why we're getting so few of them. That's why this gap between skills is only 5, even though it's only 5 at 20 and at 1. You need to not think about this game in terms of 1E's math. That 5 is 25% better than you would be at every level, as opposed to at high level, that 5 would not even matter because you're at rolling plus 42 on a 20-sided dice against a single-digit DC. It doesn't matter anymore. And because they've done that, the math is tighter. The math doesn't need to be as big numbers. The fact that the attack rolls all go on the same scale. They don't have fractionals where the gap actually exceeds the possible rolls on a d20. Which was when the math broke down when we talk about the math breaking down in D&D and Pathfinder, that's what we're talking about. We're talking about rolls being literally impossible unless you dedicated yourself to doing them. And under this new system, it will never break as long as they don't break the math. And while I've not gotten to do a lot of high-level play, I have been crunching the math on this game, and it holds. It holds just like Starfinder's math holds. For the same reasons they made similar choices in Starfinder, this actually goes a bit further. And that's why you need to not freak out that you're only getting these 1s and 2s, because those 1s and 2s are everything right now.
I do think that was important, because we did we started pretty strong and positive with the gameplay and the system, and it did feel like as we went down the list, we got more negative and more frustrated with certain elements. But I think it's because of that language problem, which is that the more you talk about the game, the more you will get tripped up by the language. But the math is good.
The math is great.
You're right about that, and I'm glad that you've done this much analysis of the math, because I just kind of got a feel that the math was right.
Yeah. Like the skills kind of worry me at the top end, because it's making assumptions that you're going to need to get skill boosting items in order to compete at that top end. But other than that, the math holds super well. So, and I have a feeling that the skills will hold super well too through the course of normal play. But I don't have a bunch of high level normal play to judge that off of. But yeah, the math holds.
My fear about the skills is that you will need, because you're not spreading out multiple points, you cannot have that much redundant skill in your party. So having high DCs means that there's probably only one person that can actually hit that DC, but they have to roll. It's a thing they could fail at, and first edition did not handle PCs failing at things well, even though it happened a lot.
Right.
So that's where, if this skill system is going to be very much, this person has this suite of skills, one of which they're great at, a couple of which they're okay at, then the DCs either have to be lower, or there has to be it really has to say, like, you failed, that's okay, but here's the consequences.
Yep. Now let's talk about stuff that's hype. The options.
All right.
Where are we starting?
Now, we're going down the list. We're starting with Ancestry.
Okay.
So, in first edition, the first thing you would establish are your ability scores, which is tied into your first edition race, now called Ancestry in second edition, or in second edition playtest. You don't start with your ability scores. Your ability scores are the culmination of your Ancestry background and classes, which is called the ABCs of character creation, which I just completely respect what they did with the language there. That is well done.
Yes. Very good. Very good. Yeah. And you will get similar ranges and scores that you're used to. I've created dozens of characters now under the new system just to screw around with it, and also to test out Hero Lab Online, which they have ready to go at launch. It's got some bugs, but it has let me just, like, fly through making characters.
I disagree about the range. I find the range is very limited and very repetitive, and that frustrates me very much. But you come from a preference of points buy, and I come from a preference of dice rolling for stats.
Oh, okay, yeah, that would make a huge difference.
Yeah, so the way I played through the character creation is I wanted to make Kark. Karkercast is my gnome giant slayer, and he is fun for reasons that no other character I've ever played is fun, which is mostly that you expect him to fail because he is a gnome fighter. He does fail quite a bit, but he succeeds more often than he fails, and his successes are not as bad as you expect them to be. It really was like, this is just a combination of playing against type that really worked for me, and a lot of that was based around the ability scores that I rolled, because he had a very low charisma, which is fine for a fighter, but almost impossible for a gnome, because he had a 9 charisma, so he couldn't even use his spell-like abilities. And this is modified, so I had rolled a 7, I gave him the +2, he still had a -1 modifier, he had a 9 the ability, and that defined Kark as much as any of his actual bonuses.
Okay, let's do this. Let's make Karkercast. I have Hero Lab. Let's just make him. And that'll help us explain this.
Okay, so the first thing you got to do is apply your ability modifiers. Oh, sorry.
First thing I have to do is name him.
Of 10s. Fine. First thing you do is name him. It's Karkercast, or just Kark. And then to determine your ability scores, everything starts as a 10. So you start with no penalties.
Right.
Then you apply your Ancestry.
Okay.
Every Ancestry has 2 bonuses. One of them is specific to one of 2 ability scores. One of them is floating, and then one of them is a penalty.
Okay, so Karkercast is a gnome, right?
Karkercast is a gnome.
Okay, hold on. I'm going to try and share this. I'm going to try to share the screen.
Screen share?
Yeah.
Okay.
So main monitor, TV screen. Okay. Okay, it's going to say no direction beyond for a little bit, gang. Sorry about that.
And I'm going to correct the thing I said. I said you get 2, one of which is specific and one of which is free. You get 2 specific and 1 free, and then 1 ability flaw.
Okay, it's making me reload.
Yep.
Make sure. Okay, so yeah, we've got Karkercast up on screen. It's reloading. It's a little slow. I'm wondering if we have had the Reddit effect on it and everybody slammed it at once. Okay. So Ancestry gnome. Okay.
Yes.
And that
Hit
means
points 8.
Hit
I like
points
that.
8. Mm-hmm. So I'm going to pull up gnome real quick here. Ancestry gnome, so you can see. Hit points 8, size small, speed 20.
Okay. Ability boost, plus 2 to Constitution, so we're up to 12 con.
Okay, so you're going to choose the Constitution as the racial bonus?
Am I choosing? I thought I got...
Oh, wait, no, you got Con and Charisma by default, and you get
Yes.
a freebie. So where's your freebie?
Free one's going to Strength.
Strength. And it's important to note that you can't pick something that already got a boost at that step, so you couldn't go Con twice.
Right, but you can replace your flaw.
Yes.
To even it out, which is what I'm doing. The flaw is Strength, totally in line with Kark. So I'm replacing that. My Strength is now at 10. I've got a 12 Con and a 12 Charisma.
Okay.
Which right away is... I object to that because Karkercross is not a 12 charisma. He is not a charismatic person. He is obnoxious.
Right.
And that was a defining quality of him. And the fact that I cannot do anything to lower this 12 con
well, you
sucks
can.
for me. There is one thing that specifically says I could just take a lower ability score for no benefits.
Exactly.
And I reject that conceptually. I like this to be systematic. And the system has failed my ability to make Karkercast because I cannot make an uncharismatic gnome. Which hurts a lot of my character concepts because my starting point will always be I am this, in first edition, this race in this class. One of them I am playing against type. Now let's talk about Ancestry feats, which also is dangerously close to everything is on type. Like if I want to be the gnome that is not like a gnome or the elf that is not like another elf, good luck, because everything you have to do has to be in some way showing how gnomish or how elf or how dwarf you are. I very much get frustrated reading through these because it's like, just give me a generic one, something that it's a little bit that I can play with, that if I don't want to be very gnomish or very elvish, I have something there. Instead, every single character that I'm going to play is going to be the same percentage of what you expect from an elf or gnome or whatever your ancestry is, just within some flexibility. And the flexibility is good, but the not being able to play against type, man, this is the hill I die on, because that is my go-to. This is how my characters get interesting. And
now,
it is denying me the ability to make my characters interesting to me.
I have a counter argument that is actually going to play into Lauren and Alex's hills to die on that you'll read later, is that these choices here exist because they have taken those. You would have automatically gotten many of these in first edition just by choosing gnome. You would have gotten magic spells and illusion sense and several of these. You would have gotten those anyway. You would have been forced to take them because gnome. And now
I would have
they
been
have stripped
with
those
not
off.
having a choice.
Right.
Because this, I get certain ownership over this because it is a choice. I am getting ownership over something I don't want ownership of.
Okay. So
and
which one?
Again, like the solution is a generic one.
Right.
The one I happen to go with is Discerning Smell.
Okay.
It is the heritage feat. Every ancestry has one heritage feat, as it's presented here. We don't know what it's eventually going to have, but one heritage feat, which is a feat you can only take at first level. And then 9 other options, 2 of which, as I mentioned earlier, are weapons related. The exception to all of this is human, which we're going to get to later. But every other ancestry is pretty formulaic. It's 10 ancestry feats, 1 heritage, 2 of them are weapon. So yeah, I took the Discerning Smell, which makes me locate things with smell when I so choose. So if vision is not an option.
So
and that kind of works for Kark, because Kark is going to be a barbarian in this instead of... Kark was a ranger barbarian fighter so that I could qualify for a prestige class, which was the Giant Slayer. So he was more complicated than he should be in 3rd edition, or more complicated than most of my classes. So in this one, I'm just going to stick to barbarian for now, and I'll explain why I would have liked more choices when I get to class.
Okay. So that's your A. And that's all
my
the
A. Yes, because I'm not going to have a high enough intelligence for bonus languages.
So it's B time.
B time is background. All right, so Kark's actual background is that he is the protector of the gnome village, even though he actually is a self-hating gnome and he finds gnomes just the worst, but he is tasked with protecting them, so he takes his responsibility very well, even though he kind of hates every second of it.
Okay.
The closest thing to that was warrior.
Okay.
Warrior gives me strength, two boosts, one of which has to be strength or con. I'm going with strength.
Yeah. The warrior says that as a warrior in a tribe or a member of the militia or army, you wade in the battle in your younger days. You might have wanted to break out from a regimented structure of those forces, or you could have always been as independent a warrior as you are now.
So I am taking strength, and then what is a free ability boost? I
free-
have my notes.
A free
elsewhere.
ability boost is your choice. So you can choose from that. You can choose either strength or con. You have to choose one of those. So you went with strength, and now you get one more that can be anything but strength.
Oh, you know what? I think I went with Dex for this one.
Okay. All right.
And then I get quick repair as a skill feat. You know what? I forget what that does.
That lets you repair in 10 minutes instead of an hour. You can repair. That's important if you're using a shield because you got to bang those dents out.
I don't plan to, so that's a wash, but whatever. I'm okay with that. And then I'm trained in warfare lore, sorry. I like that very much. That sounds kind of cool.
So let me go back to that. Yeah, so that's something to point out. This is where we said, so you get a skill feat for free from your back, well, not for free, but every background gets a skill feat, and it makes sense that it's quick repair because warrior type people need to take care of their weapons. And you also get a lore skill, and that is what you're going to get. So you get warfare lore.
All right, moving on to class. So I had two choices. I had many choices, but ultimately to get Kark true to form, I had to either take Barbarian or Ranger, because Barbarian reflects his go-to is he screams and runs into combat. And Ranger would have given him favorite enemy giants, which totally made sense for me.
And why not Fighter?
Of the three classes that I took to qualify for that prestige class, Fighter was the choice that was the most mechanical. I needed a certain number of feats to qualify for that prestige class. Fighter was the fastest way to get those combat feats.
Okay. I just meant that conceptually.
Conceptually, he is more of a tribal type of dude, so Barbarian or Ranger fits better.
So which one do you go with this time?
I went with Barbarian.
Okay. Barbarian.
So at first level, I get a Barbarian feat.
Yes. Now, not every class gets a feat at first level. Some of the spellcasters don't.
Well, Barbarian does. So I went with Sudden Charge. Spring Attack was one of Kark's go-to feats. And actually, that was one of the things I needed for that prestige class that I took. And Sudden Charge most reflects that. Basically, everyone has Spring Attack now, which is you can move, attack, and then move again. Sudden Charge lets me move double my speed and does something else.
It uses two actions that let you move twice your speed and then smack. So basically, you're getting a free move out of it.
Yeah, and then if I want to move back, then I can tactically play Kark exactly as I always played him in combat.
Yep. So and Sudden Charge.
And then I get to choose a totem.
Yeah, all barbarians are totem barbarians in 2nd edition.
But the totems are interesting because I was expecting most of them to be animals, but no, animal is one totem.
Right.
Dragon is another.
The Fury, Giant, Spirit,
Fury
and
is one,
Superstition.
So I went with Giant. Even though Kark is the Giant Slayer, I also kind of like the idea that he's got a bit of a Napoleonic complex. And it lets him, even as a small creature, wield a large weapon, which is the exact kind of absurd fun that I enjoy out of Kark. That it's like he's probably going to have trouble hitting because his strength is not amazing, but he's going to be handling this massive weapon that he probably killed a giant and stole their weapon, which means that I get to justify him not having favorite enemy giant by having some other way that it fits into his class.
And in Pathfinder 2, they handle weapon sizes by it moves the dice up a step. And then if you're already at D12, it just adds +2 to the damage.
You know what? I did not buy his equipment when I made the character, so I am curious what kind of damage he's going to be doing. So Kark traditionally dual-wield hammers, but I'm not going to be dual-wielding them because dual-wielding Spring Attack was just a terrible combination, but by then I was committed to the visual. So I would rather do a two-handed weapon. I am a barbarian, so I have access to my martial melee weapon, so I'm going to look for a nice hammer.
Oh, this is also when I accept your starting wealth of 150 silver pieces.
All right. Well, a warhammer will only cost me 12 silver pieces. Does 1d8 for medium, So it'll be a size category up. I'll be doing 1d10 damage with my hammer as a
Yeah. And also,
small-
Titan Mauler doubles your rage bonus to damage when you're using a big weapon.
That's true.
Yeah. Titan
So, yeah.
Mauler's a nice one.
So of the ABCs, the only thing that I really objected to was the Ancestry. And actually, there's another element of Ancestry we should go into before we move on away from it completely. Oh, Hillgiant is saying Maul is the two-handed hammer. Yeah, you know what? Maul makes sense.
Okay.
All right,
Well,
so
we're not at equipment's coming up, so we're not at the equipment step anyway.
Okay. All right, so Ancestry. Here's the funny thing. I know that on Discord, oh, shoot, who is it? Somebody is passionately against the idea that you get better as your race as you go up in levels. It's Chris Kimmel. Every chance he gets, anytime that Ancestry comes up, he's like, why am I getting to be a better dwarf, better whatever, when I go up in level? Matt recently came over to my house, who I've been playing with, who I had played with for over 10 years. He had not been following the blogs, but he is an avid Pathfinder player. And when he was talking about the playtest rulebook, the first thing he called out as strange is that you get better as your Ancestry as you go up. And then Tina was in the kitchen. She used to be a Pathfinder player, but she has fallen out of the hobby over the last couple of years. She also says, that makes no sense. And this is a thing where the rules are, like, the rules validate their existence from a rules point of view, but from a logic point of view, no matter what your level of experience is, a lot of people are like, well, how does that make sense? Why do I get these ancestral feats as I go up in level? Now I could justify it a little bit. If, like, Param, let's say there was a Canadian Ancestry. Now, Param, how often do you hear me talk about hockey?
Never.
Never. Have you ever heard me use the word before?
Yes, but I'll need to talk about how you're not a fan.
All right, fair enough. It's reasonable to assume that if there was a Canadian Ancestry, hockey-based feats would be in there somewhere.
Right. It would be right next to the poutine section.
Sure, all right. I would definitely take a poutine feat.
I know.
So if tomorrow I decided I was getting into hockey, I could call somebody up and borrow the equipment that I need to play a game. I could find out where the nearest arena is that has free play and get in on a game. I could find out stats from people that are just within my, like, people that I have conversations with every day. I could just be like, today we're talking about hockey, and I can get better at hockey. Do you, as not a Canadian, have the same access to hockey equipment, hockey knowledge, and anything else you would need to suddenly be good at hockey?
No. I need access to an ice rink.
Yes. Oh, I have multiple ice rinks within, well, not walking distance. Definitely not skating distance, but yes. Within a certain distance, I could definitely go to multiple different skating rinks. Surely one of them has a free skating night. So I could justify that happening occasionally, where it's just like, I want to deep dive into this aspect of my ancestry. As a member of this ancestry, I have access to ways to get better at this that then someone who is not in my ancestry does. So a dwarf who suddenly decides he's going to get into gems, or an elf that suddenly decides they're going to get into magic, they can do that. But for it to happen 5 times, I believe, is the number of ancestry feats you get over your career, that's stretching it. It's stretching the logic a little too much for me.
Okay.
And then there's another thing about Ancestry that really frustrated me. When the name was changed from race to Ancestry, the first thing I thought was, oh, good, that means that ethnicities aren't just going to be a human thing anymore. You can say that a TN dwarf is going to be different from an inner sea dwarf just because of the climate that they are exposed to, the food that they eat, and you are what you eat. And so it's like, finally, ethnicity is going to open up. No! For some reason, only humans have ethnicities, and this baffles me.
Man,
why are humans the only one that the
rant.
region that they grow up in, the animals that they are exposed to, the climate that they have to deal with throughout their entire life? Humans are the only ones that seem to care about this. It doesn't make any sense.
It doesn't. And you're right, and you're right. I mean, we need to be careful that we don't get into the Forgotten Realms version where there's 30 different types of elves and they turn green and get gills and then they fly and they're blue and that sort of thing. But
that's
it
like
matters.
Sub-races. An ethnicity
Right.
is just like, you're exposed to an extra 2 hours of sun per day, and so you are more likely to have resistance to sunburns. Like, this is just completely natural things that should apply universally across all, at least, like, Earth-based / Galarian-based ancestry. Like, once you start talking about tieflings or whatever, it's like, okay, fine, maybe you wouldn't be affected the same way because you have planar ancestry, but, a dwarf from the Arctic should be different from a dwarf from the desert just based on where their family has grown up and where evolution has taken their genes.
Yes.
So why? Why?
I don't know, because there's not infinite pages, and this section got written out in the original version of the campaign setting book. That's why.
Hillgiant is suggesting ancestry or ethnicity can be ancestry feats. Yes, they could be heritage feats.
I just don't.
They could also be backgrounds.
That could be. I don't know. That makes a very dangerous direction to go into.
Okay.
Yeah. So maybe we could just flesh out a bunch of ethnicities for all the races when the campaign setting book comes out, and maybe not focus on it so much in the core rulebook. Just like they did for the original Pathfinder.
Now, Russ Brown is saying you can apply a Mwangi ethnicity to a human or an elf or a dwarf. So, sorry, Russ, are you saying that based on how it's written now, you can do that? Or are you saying that's a direction they could have gone with the rulebook? Because I think ethnicity should have been at the beginning of the Ancestry chapter, not specifically in the human chapter.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. All right, well, while we're talking about ancestries and humans, half-orcs, half-elves. How do you feel about those?
It's an interesting way to do it. I'm not a fan, but I'm not having a huge rejection of it. I would be much more happy if this leads to this becoming a common concept for mixed heritage characters across the board. And I also think that elves need a half human.
Sure. Well, I could have sworn I read in the blog that these are not going to be strictly half human, that it could be a half dwarf, half orc.
Human has half elf. I wanted elf to have half human.
But I thought I saw in the blog that you could have a half orc, half dwarf. But then if you look at the half orc ancestry feat, it has the human trait.
Right, yeah. No, you have to. Right now it's just humans. And that's just how it is. It's a little bit clunky. I see why they're going for it. I can see this growing into a better thing. Not a fan immediately, but I don't hate it.
There was enough mechanical crossover between half-elves, half-orcs, and humans in first edition that mechanically this feels pretty similar. And actually, one thing I do like is that there's you could take these feats multiple times, the half-elf heritage and the half-orc heritage, because the first time you take it, you choose a couple of options out of a list of, I believe, 4.
Mm-hmm.
And the second time you take it, you get the remainder of those options. So it is that same weirdness of like, well, why weren't you like this all along?
Mm-hmm.
But at least like you get access to more things that if you get more invested into it.
Mm-hmm. So let's move on with creating Kark.
All right.
So where
are we? We're talking about skills?
See, we did background. We picked your class. Barbarian, It says that you get Rage at first level, which is when raging, minus 1 AC, plus 2 damage, plus 2 hit HD. But because you're a totem Barbarian, it makes you get Titan Mauler, which makes that bigger when you rage, specifically.
We didn't go into my Anathema,
right,
which is the right word, but it doesn't feel good saying that word.
It's a constant they use across all the classes. The thing you ain't allowed to do is called your Anathema.
Why didn't they just call it thing you ain't allowed to do?
Because they don't have the sexy accent I do.
There you go. Actually, I do think it applies more. Like, it feels more comfortable saying that for a cleric or a paladin than it does for a barbarian.
Right. Yeah.
So I wouldn't be allowed to refuse a personal challenge of strength.
Now,
totally in line with my character.
Because you chose Barbarian, it also meant your strength automatically went up by 2 because that is the primary ability score for Barbarians. Some classes can choose between a few, but Barbarian is specifically strength.
All right, so I believe we've finalized my ability scores.
No, now you get your first level choice of 4. You can pick 4 ability boosts now. You can't boost the same stat twice. So right now you have 14 strength, 12 dex.
Boost strength.
Okay, boosting strength. You now have 16 strength. You have
Yeah.
12 dex, 12
Boost
con.
dex.
Okay, boosting
Boost
dex.
con.
Boosting con. So it's 16, 14, 14. 10 int, 10 whiz, 12 charisma.
Boost whiz.
Boosting whiz. Alright. So your final stats are 16 strength, 14 dex, 14 con, 10 intelligence, 12 wisdom, and 12 charisma.
And that feels like it's going to be a pretty standard array. I have a feeling some people will have an 18, but
Yeah.
because I had the deficit because of my ancestry, I ended up with one stat a little lower and one stat much higher than I wanted it to be.
Yeah.
And I really do not see a lot of variety there.
I'm seeing a lot of I build a lot of characters, and I'm seeing a lot of 18, 16, 12s, and I'm seeing a lot of 18, 14, 14, 14s, and I'm seeing a lot of dual 16s with a 14 kicker. So this is pretty standard for like when you're building arrays or you're building old point-based characters in first edition Pathfinder. But yeah, if you're used to rolling, you would need to roll again, and that is an option in the playtest rulebook, but it's not the one they want us to use for the official playtesty parts because they want some sort of standardized stats. But I imagine that that's going to be an optional rule in the final version too, because of just how much of a sacred cow rolling 3d6 is.
46. Drop the lowest.
Right. Well, that's anathema. Okay, it is time to do skills.
All right. So
Your signature
I have
skills.
3 signature skills,
Mhm.
and I have 3 skill points because I have no intelligence modifier. So it even recommends that you should take all your signature skills, which means those are the only skills I'll really end up with.
Okay, so are you gonna
Acrobatics,
do that?
athletics, intimidation. They're all good for me.
Okay, so you have taken those. This means that your final adjustments are +3 for your acrobatic rolls, +4 for your athletic rolls, and +2 for your intimidation rolls. You also have warfare lore as a signature skill, thanks to it being your background.
Oh.
You're automatically trained in it too, so you don't have to invest in it. In fact, you can't. And that is a +1 roll because it's int based.
Yeah. All right. So yeah, that feels like a small list of skills.
Mm-hmm.
Especially, I'm used to the barbarian being one of the subtly more skilled characters out there.
Mm-hmm.
So having a skill section that's just those 4 skills, and everything else I'm okay at, but it's based on my ability scores, which are spread out. So I'm mostly just rolling my level.
Oh, this would be a good. We've kind of already been interacting with chat, but I'm supposed to say some point in any given episode that we do this live in front of a Twitch audience at twitch.tv/NoDirection every Wednesday at 8:30. That's either going to be us or me, Alex, and James as we talk about Starfinder on No Direction Beyond. And so, if you've got questions, ask in chat. If you ever want to talk with us live during a show, come and join our chat. We love interacting with our chat room.
Speaking of chat, Eruvana brings up Goblin as a core ancestry, something that we completely skipped over, but it is too hot of a topic for us to not at least mention again. How do you feel about Goblin as a core ancestry?
I'm indifferent. I really don't mind it. They did kind of give... Okay, so here's some real facts. There's a bunch of people that argue that they've done everything they can to cast goblins as these horrible evilness ever. And that is true if you stopped reading Pathfinder in the first 2 years of it being created. Since then, they've released dozens of goblin-related adventures and materials and stuff where they've been very subtly shifting that burden a little bit, especially the Weeby Goblin series has been doing a lot to more humanize the goblins, oddly enough. And the justification is that it is a bunch of tribes realizing that being a goblin is suicidal, and they're going to try to not be quite as absolutely chaotic murder machines and see if they can get along in society. It is definitely feels a little metagamey, but I can dig it. I'm not a huge fan, but I've never been a huge goblin fan to begin with, other than how fun they are to use as enemies. And I'm not super invested in it.
Yeah, I'm mostly against it, but not passionately. So just like I can see the kind of play that it will encourage, and it'll just throw off the dynamic of how heroes like. We're talking about the barbarian, and the barbarian tends to be the uncouth class, and it's like in a certain situation you'll always have most of the party acting one way, and then the barbarian being the gruff and the one that stands out, the fish out of water. By adding a fish out of water ancestry, I'm worried that we're going to get a lot of fish flopping around in every social scene.
It's going to be Kinder problem, right? When the Kinder were introduced to D&D, they were often a race everybody disliked because they had a racial tendency to steal from their friends, so players would use that as an excuse to troll their own players.
And I mentioned this before when we were talking about the blog post, but the gnome already kind of straddled that line, but I also think the gnome had enough redeeming social qualities that it justified it, whereas goblins are not supposed to, except the goblin does have a charisma bonus, which also doesn't sit right with me.
Yeah. The gnomes also have a tendency that they usually are, they're not officially good aligned, but they're usually more quirky plus helpful quirky. They're not party destroy monsters. That's not built into their chassis. They're just meant to be the weird kooky race that is not meant to. They don't have I betray my own friends as a built-in mechanic, whereas Goblin very well can have that built in. So that is a worry.
Yeah, like a gnome is kind of like when you're talking to a kid, and it's like, that is a fascinating conversation I've had. Most of it was nonsense, but at least I enjoyed the nonsense, whereas a goblin is more like talking to a kid that just, it's talking to a brat versus talking to an interesting kid.
Right.
You're still not talking on a level as equals, but you're getting something different out of it.
Okay, so next up is feats. General feats, you get none. Skill feats, you get none.
Oh, get used to that, Param. I'm going to be saying general feats and saluting you a lot.
And then rituals, you don't have any because you're not a ritual caster. So I've done something wrong with your...
I appreciate the way you're judging me.
Well, you didn't buy it, so you don't have it.
No, you're right.
Okay. I need you to pick your alignment. It's yelling at me for not having done so.
Oh, yeah. Kark's Chaotic, good.
Okay. Add choice.
Did you say bad choice? Oh, no. Add.
Add
okay.
choice. Add choice.
Thought you were judging me.
I'm judging you. There we go. Okay, so abilities. Now it's time for equipment. We're almost done.
I was talked into getting the maul. Maul is definitely the right choice, and it's going to be a large maul. I hope Hero Lab is ready to let me take my large maul without giving me any kind of penalty.
Okay, hold on a second. Let me find Maul first. Maul! I found it. Weapon size. Large. Not crafted by this character.
True.
Okay, it's going to cost you 26 silver pieces.
I accept that.
Okay.
Can a barbarian wear medium armor all of a sudden without penalty?
I can... I know this is now starting to turn into a Hero Lab commercial, but let me go check because thankfully the new version actually has the rules
keep up with
built
you
in.
The old-fashioned way. Weapons, armor, trained in light and medium. Wow, I never didn't occur to me that I'd be looking at the medium.
Some of the totems have anathemas, so let me check here. Which totem did you pick? You chose giant totem. Nothing, no restrictions there. Let me check your feat. I know some of the feats have a restriction.
Really?
Sudden charge. As long as you're not wearing heavy armor, you can use sudden charge. Okay, so yeah, you can use medium armor, no problem.
All right, so my choice then basically comes down to hide or studded leather.
Okay.
And the big difference is the armor check penalty. So is +1 to AC worth an additional -2 to check penalty? I'm going to say no. I'm going to go with studded leather, even though I just made a big deal about being allowed to wear medium armor.
And this is a good time to talk about that there is a touch AC and an AC now. And Starfinder players are probably familiar with this concept where they have an AC, a kinetic AC, and an energy AC. Basically, it's the same concept here, where you have two different AC bonuses. Different armors favor different bonuses, such as Chain Shirt has 2 AC and 1 touch AC, whereas Studded Leather has 2 AC, 0 touch AC, and Hide has 3 AC, 0 touch AC bonus. And touch ACs is for touch spells and touch attacks, and ACs for normal getting hit with a hammer.
I'm trying to follow the logic of when you get touch AC, because if you're not wearing armor, you get no bonus to touch AC. So somehow, wearing a chain shirt makes you harder to touch than wearing nothing at all.
Yes. I'm not sure.
I get why the chain. I get why the chain shirt would have the +1 to touch AC, but nothing else in the light section does, because chain shirt is just a shirt. It's just part of the armor, so you've still got some maneuverability. But you don't have more maneuverability than if you weren't wearing armor at all.
Right. I guess maybe the armor's just interfering. Like, it's armor enough
thickness?
That it does, like, resist some of the magic effects.
You know what? Because chain shirt and chain mail both have the same +1, whereas breastplate has +2. It might just be a density thing. And then the heavy ones all have +2 to it. So even though your the cap is going down, the heavier armor goes, you are getting rewarded for having thicker armor. Okay, I think I've figured out the logic of it.
So are you still going to go with the studded leather instead of the chain shirt?
Yeah, chain shirt just doesn't feel right for Param. Not for Param, you're Param for Karkarcast.
It doesn't feel right for Param.
I think of you as a
either.
character I pretend to be in role-playing games.
Oh, wonderful. All right, so bought that. That cost you 30 SP.
I need a backpack.
Okay, good. We're going to have to go to gear for that. Let's see here. Gear. And the backpack. Okay, 1 silver. And it has... doesn't cost any bulk. It just holds bulk.
Makes sense. You know what I miss?
What?
I miss having a barbarian kit where I could just buy it. It'll have my bedroll. It'll have my tent.
Yeah, I imagine that we'll get those in the final version.
I hope we get those very soon.
Yeah, that's the best part. That was one of the best things they've ever added to the game. It was just made character creation so quick. Anything else?
No, I think we are pretty good here. Obviously, before I ever played this character, I would make sure that I bought necessary equipment like rope, a grappling hook, probably some chalk, maybe a book just to write my thoughts in. But yeah, just for the sake of this experiment, I am fairly happy with how I see Kark playing. Really bothered by that 12 charisma. Not just the idea. Like, I'll be better at having magic items and stuff because of this bonus. And Majuba's in chat, and he does say, as the core rulebook points out, charisma is force of personality, and Kark is a force of personality. But so much of the inspiration for the Kark character was based on the idea that a gnome with a charisma penalty, that he's just very much an anti-gnome who is somehow in charge of protecting the gnomes. Like, the concept really tickled me, and they have denied me being tickled.
So here's some good news for you.
Ooh, good news.
On your first strike, when you're not raging and you're using the maul, you will attack at +3 to deal a d12 +3 damage, and you will crit for 2d12 +6. Your second attack will be at -2, and your third attack will be at -7. But when you are raging, your attack penalties go up by 1, so +2, and it will be 1d12 +7 damage.
That's nice. Plus, Kark was never built for multiple attacks. He was a spring attacker. He runs in, wallops you if he can, and then gets out of there. And that is what this character is already built to do, even though it took me 5 levels in 3rd edition to get that one tactic.
Alright, so I think that this one is ready to generate a stat block for, and that didn't look good.
What? What didn't look good?
It gave me all, like, custom code to be... Okay, so here. This is what your character looks like on the screen. I don't know if you can see the stream, but there's Karkarcast.
Question mark face.
Yeah, you can import custom art and stuff. But there.
A lot of this does feel right.
Yeah. You got a character. All right. I hope the audience enjoyed like that visual create a character to help explain the system thing.
And a lot of the direction that I can go from here for Kark is pretty much similar. Class feels right. General feats, I can definitely see what I'm doing with it. But Ancestry is going to trip me up because eventually I'm going to have to do something more gnomish. I'm going to have to get an animal companion, which I guess I could.
I don't think you have to get an animal companion.
No, but most of the gnome options are magical or fey-based. And Kark is just not into... Oh, you know what? I can get the weapon familiarity stuff. Yeah, all right.
Then you can bash them with a gnome.
Familiarity, weapon, innovator. I can get obsessive. All right, I think I have all my Ancestry feats figured out. And nothing offends me.
Okay,
That's
good.
a choice I am forced to take. So, all right.
All right. So, okay. So we made a character. And that's how the characters are created. That explains a lot of the systems.
Sorry, one thing. I said I had my class things figured out, but one thing I would have liked was the option to multi-class into Ranger. But the way multi-classing works is that you need to take a multi-class feat.
Right.
And effectively, archetypes of multi-class works the same way. You take a, discipline? The discipline feat is the base feat that opens up other options tied to that discipline.
Right.
And they only have multi-classing feats for the pillars. Fighter, cleric, wizard, and rogue.
Right. Now that will change. They have committed that if this is how multi-classing ends up working, if this is how we like it, they will have every class as a multi-class feat line. So you will eventually be able to do that.
Right. I can't do it with the playtest rules, but it's not like they were specifically trying to avoid me being able to multi-class into Ranger. They just didn't have the page count or whatever reason, development time.
Yeah, and actually that's worth talking about because both archetypes and multi-classing work the same way. It is like the specializing class package that any class can take. So Cavalier is an example. Pirate is another example that they have in here for the archetypes. Cavalier getting a demotion, kind of Elaine probably is not happy about that.
Well deserved. How many Cavaliers have you known?
Not many at all. But now it's like an option that if you want a mount and to be good at mounted combat and challenging and being all knightly, you can just add as much of that as you want by taking that. And I think that's a good solution for characters that want to do that mounted stuff, but I don't think it was ever a full class worth of concept there.
Well, especially not in a game that already has the paladin.
Yeah, and then, but for multi-classing, it's the same way. You instead of taking class feats, you take these multi-class feats that give you class abilities from another class, and I think it works really well. I like it a lot. When some of the characters I've been creating is, if you remember last year, we had a little feature on the show where we had some of our fans name help me create the character I was going to play at PFS at Gen Con. And the winner was a Magus named Darius Chainbreaker. And so I've been screwing around with how to make a Magus in this, because that's one of the things they tout with the new class and multi-class system is they don't need a Magus because you can just wizard fighter it up. And yeah, going pure wizard and grabbing the fighter multi-class option at level 2, and I feel pretty darn Magus-y. I'm walking up, I'm smacking somebody with a sword, and then I'm smacking them in the face with a Ray of Frost. It works.
And the action economy actually works too, because a lot of your spells will only take the 2 actions, and you can still get an attack in.
Yeah, and since a lot of spells aren't attacks, like I can throw up, and some spells are just 1 action. That shield spell gets lots of use. Boom, magic shield, and then sword to the face.
And everyone effectively has a full base stack bonus because your attacks always add your character level. I feel like the Magus might even be better than the regular wizard.
And I can invest in weapons and hit points. One of the things that you can take as the fighter multi-class is just, give me some more hit points, please. And they will. And then the other one is make you very good at a set of weapons, so I feel like I'm actually good at that sword, just like a fighter would be, and I'm wearing armor. And important to note, armor no longer hurts spellcasting in any way. You just need to be good at it, and you can just be good at it if you want. Yeah, you can just wear all the armor you want. It doesn't matter. You have to
totally miss that.
You need to be good at it, or else you're going to take penalties for wearing armor. But if you go and invest in armor training, or take the fighter multi-classing to become trained in armor, or different ways to become trained in armor, then you can just wear it and keep spellcasting.
We talked about the Cavalier if you want to have a mounted character. Let's talk about animal companions and familiars.
Okay. And they have been giving those out like candy. Gnomes can get them just by taking an Ancestry feat. Did you hear that?
Yes, I did hear it.
So Rangers can choose an animal companion at first level. So can Druids. You can do so by taking the Cavalier multiclassing feat. I'm sure there's other ways to do it. And how it works is, if again, this is another thing of if you're familiar with Starfinder, all the animal companions have the minion trait, and ditto with familiars. And this means that when you give them the command action, which you can do as part of owning one of these critters, or partnering with one of these critters in the events that owning it sounds like slavery, and that's bad, then you can just give it a command, and it can take 2 actions from that command. So you take 2 actions, use your third action to tell your pet to do something, it takes 2 actions. This is very similar in Starfinder to how summoned monsters work, and again, summoned monsters work the same way. When you summon a critter, you give up some of your actions to control it. And how the drone works for the mechanic. So this seems to be the direction Paizo is taking pet classes. So you have to give up one of your actions to partner up with your pet, and the pet gets some actions from you doing that. But the pet doesn't do anything on its own until you give it actions.
And I like that one of the actions is work together. Because
Yeah.
you can specifically use its actions to get yourself... It's basically the assist action, but flavored to your different animals.
Yeah.
So your bear will give your target a bear hug.
Yeah.
While you... not crushing him or anything, but definitely making him vulnerable to your attacks.
Yeah.
And the flyby attack pecks his eyes out. Or not the flyby attack, but the bird work together act.
And the familiars got extra magical. They specifically say that choosing an animal as a familiar turns it into a magical being. And then at the beginning of the day, you're able to invest that magic. Instead of like each familiar type having set abilities, you can pick the abilities that your familiar gets, and you can swap those out every day. So it's just, I want a flying cat, and you have one. And like, I want something that can touch spell, and then it does. So and then as you get more powerful, you get more and more of those that you can have on as once. But that's an interesting way of, like, you can actually have some very magical feeling magical critters.
Going back to animal companions, I also like how they progress. They start as young, then they become adults, and when they become adults, you can start applying, basically giving them a class. They either become nimble, savage.
Yeah, and usually this is unlocked
level,
with class feats to bring them up. You can go nimble or savage right now. I think those are the only 2 in the playtest version. Nimble doesn't make them get bigger, but savage does. So they can get bigger when they become adult, and then get even bigger when they become savage. But if they stay nimble, they stay the same size as adult.
All right, Perrin, we've been going for a long time. I know at one point you wanted to go through all the different classes. Do you still want to do that? And that could be our wrapping up our character creation and options?
Sure. I just want to go over real quickly what the different classes do. And so I'm just going to go through the book. So this is just like how the new concept of the class is in the game, a sentence apiece, and I'm talking so that I can stall to flip to the pages so I don't miss one. Okay, Alchemist became very magic item crafty and lost all connections to actual magic. So they create alchemical items. They have a formula book. This one is being changed rapidly in errata. It doesn't really work well as is, but you can see where they're trying to go with it. Right now it relies heavily on the resonance system, and it doesn't look like it was designed to rely on a resonance system that didn't exist when it was created.
I know a lot of first edition Alchemist fans are also upset that you have to wait for mutagen.
Yeah.
Whereas in first edition you could specialize in one of 3 tracks or be a generalist alchemist. Whereas now it's like, no, alchemists cannot figure out mutagen until 5th level. So if you had a very mutagen based character in first edition, you are not going to be able to recreate him for a long time.
Okay. Barbarian is like Unchained Barbarian. The math is simpler. Also, all barbarians are totem barbarians. So you have to pick a totem. Other than that, Barbarian is still pretty familiar. It is the thing that rages and hit things. It's got a lot of fun class abilities in its class feats, but this is a familiar feeling class.
Yeah, and I would say about half of the Barbarian feats are rage powers effectively,
Yeah.
and the other half are a lot of combat feats that have now kind of become specialized barbarian, which people that have been listening to my objections or my concerns about second edition know that I do not like the idea that barbarians are getting things that a fighter should have access to, and vice versa. And yeah, that's basically, that fear has come true, and I am still adjusting to how I feel about that.
Right.
But I don't like it.
The Bard is still the Bard you knew and love, except now it is a full spellcaster instead of a 6th-level spellcaster. It uses the occult spell list, which is mostly the same spells it used to rely on, with a few additions. And the bardic performances are no longer inspire courage is all you ever use.
I feel like it has fewer feats than most of the classes, and most of them are things that were based on feats or the masterpieces that bards were getting in first edition. Like, just about everything here feels familiar.
Okay. Cleric is much more spellcasty focused than in previous, though it has options to get its fight back on. Other than that, the biggest change to the Cleric is that its channeling is now just straight up cast the heal spell. By the way, Cure Light Wounds doesn't exist anymore. It's just called the heal spell.
Thank goodness.
Yeah, that was always an idiosyncrasy with the game I didn't understand. But still the full divine spellcaster that you knew and loved. You still pick a domain. It doesn't mean quite as much as it used to, but it still matters. And you still get the domain spell list. Okay, the Druid is still the Druid. It uses primal spells instead of the Druid spell list that counts as divine, but it's still mostly the same thing, except for they also now get damage spells because they get all the elemental damage spells that the wizard used to have. So you can fireball and lightning bolt now as a druid. That's cool. You can also, you have to choose your focus as a druid right off the bat. So do you want to be more fey spells? Do you want to be more magic elemental damage spells? Do you want to focus on your animal companion or indeed have one at all? Or do you want to shape change right at level 1? So it basically got all the stuff we talked about that we wish the shifter had is now the druid just straight up.
I think the druid might somehow be the best generalist class.
It might
just
be.
Looking at the starting thing, it gets a decent amount of hit points, it gets good saving throws, it gets a decent number of skills, decent weapon training. It's a little bit better than average in a lot of ways. And a lot of flexibility early on.
The fighter is still the fighter, except for because of class feats, it has lots of special attacks and lots of options during combat that you might not have been used to. I mean, literally almost every feat this thing has an action token on it, which is... This is what everybody wished the fighter could have been. I think that it's hitting a lot of everyone's wish list there. It also is now able to really tank with the shield specialist version of it. You can actually have ways to protect other players that isn't just taking the one feat in the wrong book that first edition had.
Yeah, so I actually disagree with what you're saying about this being what everyone wants the fighter to be. I was a big fan of fighter in every edition up till this, but my philosophy when building a fighter is to make sure you take 2 just flat bonus feats for every feat that gives you an action, because you only have a certain number of actions, and having a suite of different actions you can take, it becomes, as you go up in level, if you're not making things bolster your attacks, then you're just a whole catalog of things you're most likely not doing. This seems to be focusing on giving you the catalog of things, and I bet that 90% of your turns are going to be the same 2 or 3 feats.
Okay, that is a danger I didn't consider. One of the reasons one of the criticisms I had about Fighter in first edition was that it lended itself too much of I pick the one thing I do and then become insanely good at it. Like, this is the one action chain I'm going to take, and every single feat I take makes it better, which I see a lot of people build. Like, it's all this is a spring attack fighter, this is a power attack fighter, this is a cleave fighter, this is a... And they maximize that tactic. And I thought that was boring because the turn is the same. So I was hoping catalog would make the options matter more. But if
You're
it
such
doesn't,
a caster.
Yes. This is the fighter that casts sword.
I feel like I'm going to get bored picking feats knowing I'm never going to use them after about, let's say, definitely after 10th level. I think my feat choices are going to matter a lot less.
Maybe. We'll see how that works in play. Because that is a concern, because having the options doesn't help if you still only use one of them. So they need to make sure the options are awesome. Monk. Monk is Monk plus Brawler plus the weird stuff it got in Ultimate Combat all rolled up into one. You get Flurry of Blows is now awesome. You are definitely a frontline fighter straight off the bat. Not the sort of frontline fighter that Please Don't Hit Me, Mr. Minotaur, and that's how I lost one of my best PFS characters.
Yep. I think I know the Minotaur.
Yep. That jerk. And then you get lots of fighting styles, but again, you get actually this is also the Brawler, so if you want less of a martial arts focus and you just want a pure beat 'em up dude without any of the trappings, you can also still be a monk.
You can also be the King Gong, basically the Street Fighter monk, right? You can get spell powers.
Yes, you totally can. You can cast Scorching Ray. All right, Paladin. Paladin had a bunch of major changes, and I like them. They are now the I am the defensive class. They are the I protect the party class, and I punish the bad guys for doing things in front of me. So they have a lot of fun with reactions. The fighter gets attacks of opportunity, and he's the only class that gets it automatically. The Paladin, she gets all kinds of fun reactions based on how you choose to build them, but one of the ones they get is they can just straight up put their shield in front of an ally and take a hit, or they can retributive strike, so they can, if somebody tries to hit your ally, you can just bring down the divine smackdown and try to interrupt that, or at least punish it severely. It's a lot of fun. They lost what they used to have for spellcasting, and instead get these benedictions that are basically power spells. That weird thing with powers are spells and spells are powers we talked about earlier. They get a whole bunch of those that are designed specifically to be used in conjunction with a sword and shield and in the middle of combat, that are more specialized to that. And they still get the mercies. They still get the lay on hands and a lot of choices on how they punish people when they level up.
Yeah, the Paladin kind of has the reputation for being the party jerk. Second edition Paladin's your pal. Yeah.
Also, they really eased up on the 4 laws of robotics for Paladins, and now they're not just automatically failing their moral quandaries, because now they have priorities. It's like, oh, I have to let them burn down the orphanage because I can't lie about it. Is not a situation again. You can totally lie if it means saving orphans from Richard. Ranger, ooh boy, Ranger became the Slayer.
Yes.
Plus the Hunter.
Yes.
Yeah.
It's also so. If I were to categorize a lot of the fighter combat feats, it's like there's thought put into this. You have trained. You are good at what you do. Or like you know what, the fighter is the sword wizard and the barbarian is the sword sorcerer, where the barbarian just gets it. They just like, you give them a sword and they can smash you even if they've never trained with that sword before. The ranger feels like the in-between between the two of them, and I don't quite like that. I wish the ranger feats had more of their own niche to them. I like if they incorporated a little bit more nature tactics into it, like using your environments, a little more trap stuff.
Yeah. I do like when you're pet focused, it does a really good job of like absorbing what the hunter used to do with the pets and the druid used to do with the animal companions. So you can have like I have my animal buddy and we fight together. The ranger is actually probably the best at it, even better than the druid with the same critter. But there seems to be this is also the dual wielding class. This is one of the 2 classes that get good at dual wielding, and the rogue is not the other one. So that's a problem with the way the feat siloing is working right now. I kind of wish that the weapon styles would be in general feats instead of completely siloed, so that this is Lauren, Dova Queen's her hill to die on. Is this the siloing means that only the rangers and fighters are good at dual wielding, and no matter how much you wish you could be, you can't be as a rogue right now unless you happen to take the fighter multi-classing to grab it. And their abilities, the hunt target, I like that it exists, but I kind of wish it was more not focused on multiple attacks and just straight up damage bonus like favorite enemy was, because then it would synergize a lot better with all of its different fighting styles. And right now, being a dual wield ranger, one of the things it's actually good at, doesn't synergize with it at all. Like you get a marginal bonus for using your primary class feature if you go down that path. And there's a few other examples of that, but it needs some work. But I think it's not completely broken. I can see the potential in the direction, and I don't miss losing spells at all. I think very few rangers liked spellcasting. Rogue. It's the Unchained Rogue. You get sneak attacking. You get dex to damage. You're the only class that does. You get to put on conditions when you do sneak attacks. You get some fun, dirty tricks, and you get lots and lots of skills and skill feats.
It trained in 10 skills at first level.
Oh man, it's nuts. It's a great class. When they get dual wielding added onto this, it might be perfect. I don't have a lot of objections here, and like I said, if you're familiar with the Unchained version of the Rogue, that's the Rogue.
So I'm just double checking. So Bard is the next with 7 skills, and then the Ranger has 6. So that 10 is significant.
Yeah, I think they've changed the Alchemist and the Errata gets more skills. So maybe
from 2 to 3.
Yeah. Oh, and some extras on top of that. Mark Softer did a clarification on one of the posts.
Oh, really?
Yeah. So like they're working. The Alchemist is like the class that's getting the most active. Like you can see that like the supports are still being put up, and they're like the nail gun is just going into that class every other week right now. So this is a playtest. They will change it frequently, and that's the class that's getting the most attention at the moment. Sorcerer. Okay, so the cool thing about Sorcerer is that the bloodline now determines which of the spell list you use, and that's really cool because you can have a divine sorcerer that's angelic or demonic, because that's weird. Or you can go with dragon or arcane, or you can go occult with the aberrant sorcerer bloodline, and that's all very cool stuff. I like the
primal with Fae.
A primal with Fae, I forgot that one. And that really fits the theme. I've got nature as part of my blood, and I've got magic as part of my blood, and the top of that blood determines what magic it is. I think that is a home run choice. The class needs a little bit of boosting to be on the equal playing ground with spellcasting as the others. It's because it's a spontaneous casting class. It has all these additional restrictions they put on spellcasting. Like all the other classes, when you learn a spell, you can scale it up just by slotting it up when you memorize it. But the spontaneous casters have to learn it for every possible slot up, which I understand what they did. They explained it during some of the panels that the ones that scale up would automatically be the better spells to choose. I think that's a fine price to pay. I think that protecting against that with a clunky rule that they have is a bad decision. I think the free scaling should just be a thing, but especially since the prepared spellcasters already have so many ways that they can dabble into the spontaneous camp, and the spell numbers per day are the same. The sorcerer really suffers from that. But the bloodline powers are cool. They're beefed up. Like I said, that the bard and the sorcerer are the ones that have their powers beefed up compared to the other casters, and they just got a lot of versatility. This is the other way to heal, is to just go with angelic bloodline sorcerer.
I know I'm not a caster. I'm not known for playing casters, but the sorcerer does have my attention.
Yeah.
I might roll up a sorcerer. We'll see. Just play outside my comfort zone, see if it's a little more appealing to me in the new edition.
Or Blood Rager. You can when the
Ooh.
multi-class for Sorcerer and Barbarian come out, mix and match. That's a
Are they
popular.
coming out as PDFs?
No, when the full release comes out.
Okay, it is a full.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
You got me excited for a second there, Param.
But or
No, I'm curious
Sorcerer
about the sorcerer
Fighter.
as a full fighter, as
Sorcerer
a full
Fighter.
caster.
Yeah, yeah. And I think it works. Wizard is Wizard. It like all the spellcasting class, they took a hit. Their low level control spells aren't as powerful as they used to be. But at the flip side, all low level spells no longer have those silly hit point caps, so you can still use Daze. Like if you chose Daze as a cantrip, you didn't waste that choice as soon as you hit level 5, which is a thing that used to happen. And when you slot those lower level ones up, the nerfs that they had go away. So if I take Daze and slot it up into a higher spell slot, actually Daze isn't one, but if I take Sleep, because Daze is a cantrip, although it doesn't have a scaling, but if I take Sleep and slot it up, it suddenly gets all its potency back again that it lost. And then they limited the number of spells per day that all spellcasters get, and the wizard fills that. You no longer have restrictive schools, so you just pick a specialty or universalist, and it's all bonuses, no penalties, which kind of makes up for that. And this is the class that benefits the most from all this free scaling, because they can take the most advantage of that. And they buffed damage spells. We've talked about in the past, or I have, that damage spells are actually the worst choice that you can make as a wizard or sorcerer. Sorcerers have a way to boost them up to where it's not a terrible choice. But now they've buffed up damage. I still need to run the math. It still doesn't look like it's the best thing in the world to do, but now it's no longer just complete waste of spell slots.
All right, Param. It is 11 o'clock, so
Yeah.
I don't even know if we're going to talk about Gen Con. I do want to talk a little bit about presentation and order of information.
Okay.
Specifically, why did they take away the summary of feats in the feat charts?
I don't know. They need to not do
Referencing
that.
feats is becoming such a drag because
Yeah.
there's nowhere where it's just, here's a quick sentence summarizing the mechanical side of it. No, now we've got the name and prerequisites, and we've got to read the full description to get an idea for it.
And because
oh
feats are
God,
spread through
it's
the
just-
entire book, basically there needs to just be an
And, yeah.
appendix that is nothing but the feat
Like-
reference appendix.
Well, but then the ancestries would be virtually nothing because it's a single page with the shared mechanics and then a single page of feats. So if you took the feats out of the ancestry section, it feels like
I
the
just meant a
ancestry
summary
section would be a
chart.
couple of pages.
I just meant the summary chart that
Oh, the
we're
summary
not
chart.
having.
Sorry,
They
yes,
could just put
okay.
that in the appendix. Here's all the feats in alphabetical order and what they do.
That would be fantastic. Because also weird. So ancestry feats are in the ancestry chapter. Class feats are in the class chapter. Skill feats are in the feats chapter with the general feats.
And they're the only
And it's
thing
like,
in the
why-
feats chapter.
Well, in general feats, there's some that are not skill related.
Like a half a dozen.
All right, maybe. Anyway, just the same thing. I feel like spells could have definitely used a little more summary information, but yeah, boy, just the game has become so feat focused, and for it to be so hard to reference feats is a major hit against the usability of this book.
Yeah, and it's not just that. There's a lot of cross-referencing of the rules between pages, and sometimes there's mistakes and typos and differences. The organization of this book really needs, and it really shows that this is a beta document, that it hasn't gone through its final passes. Like, ironically, in some ways, this is better edited and laid out than the Starfinder core rulebook was at launch, which kind of, I hate saying that as a Starfinder fan, but the Starfinder core rulebook almost had as many errors as the Adventurer's Guide, and
No,
has had to
come
need
on.
and has needed
The
significant-
Adventurer's Guide?
the Adventurer's Guide, not the Advanced Class Guide.
No, I know. Adventurer's Guide is up there with Advanced Class Guide as some of the most problematic and
Yeah,
the roughest editing of any of the book that was officially published.
the math is sounder, but there's a lot of editing that needed to be done to Starfinder. Like there was some there, and errata. They had to change the entire DCs for the the spacecraft system, and that's a core pillar of the game. And some of the math was literally impossible. So yeah, I'm gonna say yes. The editing was rough, but the layout and organization of information in this, and some of the things that are missing, will get frustrating. You're going to need to pay attention to the errata section and the boards as you're playtesting, because there's some vital stuff that you need to know is different. For instance, one that we had to announce, that got announced first on our live stream at Gen Con before anywhere else, was the fact that everybody's untrained is trained in unarmored, in being unarmored, which isn't in this book anywhere. So technically, even in first builds of Hero Lab that I was just playing with, in the original builds of that, you had 8 AC base because it was 10 minus 2, and it never went up because, ouch. And so just that little mistake was something that was supposed to be in this book and didn't. And that's just a small example of some of the mistakes here. So pay attention to the errata section, pay attention to the updates of the boards. This is a living document that, if you bought in Dead Tree format, is going to be worse than the real version of it that you download.
I mean, people should know that the Dead Tree version is the novelty of it, and for people that like the tactile element, like,
yeah,
you knew you were buying something that was going to be given away for free.
Yeah. I do want to call out that they have acknowledged this, but it's definitely worth calling out, that the rarity system in the game is color-coded, and some of the colors are very similar to each other. And as a person who, as part of his main job, works with the accessible technology and ADA compliance, the Americans with Disability Act compliance, that's a huge no-no. Because even as a typically sighted person that can see the differences in the colors, it is not easy at a glance. And if I had any sort of problem distinguishing color or problem with my vision, it would be impossible to understand, is something rare or is something uncommon, or is something common or is something unique. And they have said they're going to go with a different solution for that. And the other thing about the layout that I don't like is that everything has the same layout format, no matter what it is. If it's a feat, a spell, a monster, a stat block, it all has the exact same layout format with the little tag cloud and the level at the top right and the top. It is not immediately obvious what one thing is and what the other thing isn't. And I know a lot of that is probably because this is a beta rulebook and they just had the one style format that they got really good and they had to use it throughout the whole book. But I really hope that is not a change that they are dedicated to. We really need to I need to look at a feat and know it's a feat and not a spell and not a trap and not a monster.
Especially if you're going to put powers and spells in the same chapter, even though they
work not completely do differently. That at all. Powers need to be pulled out of that and put back where they belong in the class that gave them, because you only get a power from something that gave you that power, and that's where that needs to be written. And if they're going to put it in the spells section, they need to tell me where it came from. If I read this power, that's a really cool power, I want to take it. How? Don't know. Okay, small little rant. So, it looks good, the book's fine, and I love the fact that they used Wayne Reynolds' sketch art for the beta rulebook, or the playtest rulebook, so that's cool. But I really hope that in the final version, the layout's better, the organization's better, they clean up some of the language, and there's a lot of easy way to distinguish this stuff. And a lot of that is because it's a playtest.
Closing thoughts?
Closing thoughts. Okay. I like a lot of what this game is going for, and I think it's got really good goals. Make the math simpler, make the game easier to learn, make it faster during play, keep the complexity of choices so that you... Let's be honest, we have to reference other games in the genre. 5th edition is a simple game that's easy to learn and doesn't give you a lot of options. That's the criticism on the system, and then what really is the big difference between it and Pathfinder. Pathfinder, lots of character customization. 5th edition, not so much. Both good games. I like both games. I have both on my shelf here, and I will happily play in a game of either. Pathfinder needs to keep that complex part, because that's part of its core identity. That's part of its fan base, and I think they're going in that direction right. I have some pet peeves. One I haven't mentioned. and I need to mention before the podcast is over, because
You
there's
want
just
to do that now, then?
yes, okay. They got rid of Take 10. One of the most elegant systems in the game is taking 10. It was a humongous solution that solved so many problems with the game. It eliminated needless rolling. It meant that stuff that should be trivial for you was just automatic. It scaled automatically with your character's growth, and so you got better automatically at doing things without having to make any investment. So more and more things became trivial for you. It just became, you just said, I do it. And it had exceptions for when the stakes are on or they're stressed, you can't use it. It was an elegant system to the game, and they got rid of it. And they replaced it with this concept called assurance that is completely worthless. Even if you want to try to use it, you have to give up one of your rare skill feats to not become better at anything, but to just be able to take 10. And you're not even allowed to become better at taking that 10 unless you go up in ranks, because it doesn't give you a 10 plus your bonuses. It just gives you a 10 result, which is not even enough to pass the medium difficulty of a level 1 skill check. All it says is I fail something by using this ability. And yes, if you become expert later on, it goes up to 15, which again will not be enough to even use at relevant skill checks at that level. And then you can take 20 when you get, and so on. Okay, it goes up by 5 for each thing. But by the time you do that, it's pointless. All you're doing is voluntarily failing a task instead of crit failing it. And you're wasting one of your abilities to do so. And it's replaced a concept that I never had a hard time explaining to a newbie, that also made the world make sense as to why blacksmiths didn't constantly cut their hands off when they rolled crit failures while making longswords. That's my rant. That's my hill to die on. There's mine.
Is that the conclusion of all your thoughts, though?
No, I think that it's a great potential, but this is not Pathfinder as we know it. This is Pathfinder exists in a meta world, in which is the continuation of 3E. And that has been true. 3E and the game we've been playing for decades existed when it came out, and we have been playing it in some form or fashion all the way through even Starfinder's release. Starfinder is very radically different in some ways, but that kernel of the original Player's Handbook Dungeons & Dragons 3rd Edition is in there. This is not that. This is a massive break from that. This is a good system that still feels like I'm playing Pathfinder, and I like a lot of what they've done, and this may become my new favorite system, but this is a new game. This is not the game we've been playing, and not what I expected them to create when the 2nd edition came out. I don't know what that means for me long term, or my players long term, but we can't pretend that that's not true.
So a lot of my expectations were met, in that I thought I was going to like the action economy and the modes of play, and reading through the final version, these are elegant. Mm-hmm. They are just a clearly superior way of handling those things, and they get rid of so many problems that I had categorized as a bunch of individual problems when I should have realized it was a broad issue that you could change at a system level. I also had my issues about it hampering my creativity, and those issues are still there. The ancestries, I feel like, are too locked into the idea of what those ancestries could be. Backgrounds, I have we didn't mention this. In Doomsday Dawn, it says do not use the backgrounds from the core rulebook. Use these campaign-specific ones. So it's the idea of the campaign trait, but denying you then a second trait that you have flexibility on. And the backgrounds in the core rulebook, I love the way that they are very flexibly written, and they do not hamper my ability to apply that. Like that warrior one wasn't exactly right for Kark, but it was definitely the best of the choices and very close up. Whereas looking at the ones in Doomsday Dawn, it's like, you grew up on this street, you are definitely this type of person, and good luck trying to stay out of like a very locked, caged framework for what that background does to your character. And I strongly dislike the campaign-specific backgrounds that are being inflicted upon the players in the Doomsday Dawn, and I especially like that it's not complementary to the ones in the core rulebook, but that the ones in the core rulebook are the generic ones that are basically going to be replaced if you play in adventure paths, assuming it follows the same system. Right. Like, if you're not going to get two elements to your background and you lose flexibility, I would rather have a generic one and have a character that is in no way connected to the adventure path, so I don't have to deal with the times that my character is taken from me. My agency over my character is taken from me because I had who this character is told to me, or I had to choose from a very limited list, usually keyed into the class that I am playing.
Would that complaint lessen if in the future they just say these are optional for this?
Yes, very much that would lessen. If I had the choice between a campaign-specific one or a generic one, I would take the generic one every time, and I would be happy that I would not get boxed in like that.
Well, would you take one if you had the full suite of options and one of the campaign-specific ones was appealing to you?
I doubt they would be appealing to me because they are so specific.
Okay.
And my characters are so defined by how I am applying generic options.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Like, even if you look at our what is the adventure path we're playing?
War of the Crown. War for the Crown.
War for the Crown. So I took something about a patron, and it encourages me to name the patron, and I had a certain amount of control over it. Mm-hmm. But I just got so bored with the idea of it that
I made it the craziest possible option that your patron was dragons?
Yeah, it could have been. But no, it's just like, no, I have no interest in this. I have no interest in following up on this, and I really am worried about the time when the campaign will say, and now's the time to really appeal to the backstory of the person that has this campaign trait, because I have no investment in it. Mm. And the classes, I was worried that the classes were going to be boxed in, siloed options, as you've been saying. I really like that expression for it. And it remains that way. I think that I'm more interested in multi-classing than single-classing with the way multi-classing is handled. I almost feel like the classes should be very much just a few class features, and then you get your dedication. And the dedications could be the broader thing of, say, like the warrior there, the caster, that like roles. If class feats became dedication feats, and those dedications were based on the roles that you could play in the party, and they were generic and flexible, with some of them also being more specific, that I think is the better way to go. The fact that...
So what they did to the spells, then? You have these 4 spells.
I'm very happy with the spells, even as someone who doesn't like spells.
So
I do not like the idea that at some point a decision has to be made of which box to put a feat that applies to multiple classes in. I don't like that. That goes against the core thing I like about building a character. And the way I build a character inspires how I play that character, gives me ownership over the character, invests me into the game. It is all crushing my investment, and I have to ignore that these are restrictions and find ways to be invested in this character despite these restrictions. Mm-hmm. That is very much the thing that concerns me about second edition right now. But I was surprised that there was also this chunk of stuff that I was not worried about that ended up more complicated or less clear than they should be, that a lot of the language suddenly became very clunky. And so I am hoping that is just a playtest issue, because it means that here's a game that I am excited to play, can definitely see a lot of potential in the system, and I just have to get over my hang-ups that it is not tailored to how I get engaged in this game. Like the motto of my Behind the Screens blog is that different players play the game for different reasons, and I play to be engaged, to be a role player, and the way that these things are structured, they may not realize it, but it is hurting my ability to role play. And to just feel like I care about this character and that I am this character. If I can get over that, I am surprised that there is still a whole other barrier of entry just based on how clunky the language is and how poorly some of the options are laid out, which I never in a million years would have expected to be one of my issues with this book. So I would say that I am like more than 50% happy with this and can definitely see myself totally switching over. But I expected to myself to be 75% invested in this, and I am slightly less so than I expected to be. And that very much surprises me.
I wonder how much of that is the playtest, because they did mention specifically that when they were given in the panels, they mentioned when they were given two options, they would go for the most extreme option in the playtest, and as sort of just to see where the edges are, see where the limits are, and figure out where they need to go. And I feel a lot of that when I look at how extremely limiting sometimes the resonance system is, and how one-sided healing is, and how siloed all the class options are, when it makes sense that some of these should be broken out. I like your suggestion of, like, I can see a barbarian that's like, you can choose the offensive martial from the offensive martial bucket, the primal fighting bucket, and the nature knowledge bucket for your feat choices, plus these barbarian specific choices, and then that way it would make more character concepts possible. Whereas right now it seems too much is wrapped up in your classes for the marshals. The casters are the opposite. They got more freedom. Like, the casters are all free and awesome, so I'm all cool with that as a caster player. But I'm looking over at the poor rogue who has to give up one of their swords. Like, and I understand that, like, a lot of rogues did want to be single dagger or rapier and stuff, and like 3E and Pathfinder forced them to grab two short swords. But because that is a legacy, that's now a style of play that has to be supported. That's a class fantasy that needs to continue to go forward. And I get your point. I wonder how much of our complaints are just that it is beta and they're intentionally pressing our buttons. And I'm also wondering, was that such a good idea? Like, they need to be building hype for this game, and I'm seeing a lot of negativity that I didn't expect to see. I've been through a lot of edition wars. This is some of the ugliest I've seen. Like, it rivals the 4E ugliness that I saw.
Wow.
Yeah.
In a different players are in different camps, or is there a clear, this is the customer camp and this is the designer camp, and that's where the conflict is?
No, it's definitely player camps, but okay. I'm seeing. I mean, like, I don't know how much of this is just the squeaky wheel gets the grease kind of situation, but when Starfinder came out, there was a lot of hype. I mean, there were some detractors, and there were some problems with the game, but it was most hype. It was, like, huge amount of hype. When 5th edition came out, hype. 3.5 edition came out, weird, but hype, because it was an improvement of a game system and backwards compatible. Pathfinder coming out, hype. 4th edition came out, mixed. And I'm seeing a lot of that mixed with PF2, and I think some of that is because so much of this is playtest material where they're intentionally pushing boundaries that they don't intend to actually push when it's released. The original book... Let me grab it. This book here did the same thing. There are a lot of changes to the game in this book that didn't make it. They went much more extreme with the first version of Pathfinder beta than they did with the final that came out. And I expect the same thing to happen here. But I really hope that them going in that direction didn't chase away a bunch of fans that aren't going to come back to see that they reined it in. Especially with how much huge push they pushed on this, publicity-wise, to get it out there.
I'm just trying to think, because like it is easier to express a dislike than it is a like, because a like is just...
Even we did it on this review. We made specific efforts to not let the negative, but we got more passionate on our negatives than we did on our positives, even though I'm mostly positive on this game, and you're more than half positive on the game.
I love the action economy, and I love the modes of play.
That's
and
so
that
good.
Love dominates almost anything. It's almost way more love than the equivalent to how much I hate the things that I hate. And the things that I hate are like, personally, that goes against what I like. But the things that I love are like, that's better.
Right.
That is like objectively a better way of handling a system.
I like the action economy so much, we have started using it full time in the Reign of Winter. I pulled the Unchained version of it out, and we've switched over to that in my Pathfinder 1 game.
Nice.
It has made some monsters way OP. But don't tell my players I said that.
It's not like Reign of Winter is known for its lethality.
Oh, no, not at all. Rasputin doesn't have a giant list of character sheets.
Jeez. Param, what do you think about talking about Gen Con right about now?
Sure, we're in for a penny, in for a pound. This
Okay, actually, so then before
in
we
what
transition,
world didn't we know this wouldn't be the longest episode we recorded in years?
it's true.
Mhm.
Before we move on from the playtest, we should talk about how we are going to be engaging with the playtest as a network.
Oh boy, and you are going to see every minute of it, gang.
And as yet untitled, I just realized.
Yes.
We are doing an actual play podcast.
Right.
I will be GMing Doomsday Dawn.
Right.
And we will be running very close to the opening of all of the embargo dates.
Right.
So that we get them right off the bat and have plenty of time to give feedback.
Except this first
I will
one.
be GMing. Param, who's going to be playing?
Okay, I'm playing. We're still talking about characters, so we don't have announcements of that. Lauren is going to be playing. You know her as Dova Queen on the Dear Dova Queen, and she also was
Lily on Adventurous.
or Lily on Adventurous, and she was also the fantabulous assistant during our Gen Con coverage that is coming out. She really stepped up and showed that she was part superhero. That was her multi-class. Her main class is biologist, and she is fascinating talking about fish. Like, she will make fish the most interesting thing in the world.
I was going to say, isn't it specifically marine biology?
Yes, marine biology. Also, Alex and James from Beyond, No Direction Beyond, will be joining us. And Andrew Marlowe from Marlowe House, as well as the blogs here on the network, is going to be joining us. And that's the crew. So 5 names you should be very familiar with and see on many of our shows.
So I am looking forward to it. I don't think it's going to be the same as Adventurous in that Adventurous is very much character focused.
Yes.
This is really going to be mechanics focused and really diving into what this new system can do and how it can handle us.
Yeah. And that's because Doomsday Dawn is designed to be a system stressor. And it's going to force... This is... we're not going to spoil the adventure, but this is something they have advertised about it up front. Parts of the adventure do tell us to put our characters that were our main characters on hold, make a new party for a temporary part of it to show off something else, and then bring our main characters back. So you're going to see us play multiple characters each throughout the playtest adventure.
If I remember right, there's like 7 parts, and you play the characters from the first part 2 more times.
Yeah.
Otherwise, it's always new characters.
I haven't read it to keep from spoiling myself on it, so I'll take your word on that. But I think that tracks with what I've heard.
Yeah.
Yeah. But it should be a fun time. Also, it's going to be just 7 and done. Or I don't know how the episodes will really work out, but it's going to be a short while and then we'll be done with it. Whereas War for the Crown will continue with its schedule for a long time to come, assuming that we continue to successfully bring out that podcast and you all keep loving it.
Yeah,
We're getting a lot of positive feedback on Adventurous.
Because Adventurous is pretty awesome.
It
I
is.
enjoy listening to it when I edit it. There was supposed to be a new Adventurous on Monday,
Right.
but there was a timing error in the last episode, and so it only ended up being 30 minutes, and so I need to edit the next episode to see if there's a chunk I could take off the beginning, applied to the end of the one before.
I remember in those episodes.
There might be.
Okay.
Why are you blocking your hand? That's...
I was just thinking. This is my
Okay.
thinking face. This is my thinking when I don't like what I'm thinking about face.
All
This
right,
is my
the
bad
microphone
news
doesn't
face.
like...
Microphone
So
doesn't
anyway.
like bad news.
Yeah. There will be a new Adventurous on Monday. It may be 30 minutes instead of the usual 45 minutes. We shall see.
Yep.
But at least a chunk of it is edited, and if by Sunday I'm like, I really don't have time to edit the next one, I will just put out what it is now, and it'll just be a shorter episode, and then we'll be recording another one shortly thereafter.
Right.
Someone in the chat, Dragon Elvish, is asking when will the playtest one begin. We are finalizing that date. It has been a whirlwind of scheduling things going on our side between reading this book.
Who knew that Gen Con, when they were releasing a new version of Pathfinder, would throw our network for a loop? Oops.
Yeah, so before I even read the playtest rulebook, I read the first part of Doomsday Dawn just to be able to say how much time I'm going to need to prep for it and how much, and start the scheduling conversation there. And then it was like, I really need to be reading that rulebook right now, especially because I've over the last couple of rulebooks, I'm finding the more I annotate my books and just like do not care about writing in the books and just go to town. One, the better I understand that book, which makes a better review, but it also means I'm more likely to go back and use that book because I've got all these notes telling me what my thoughts were at the time and what options I wanted to explore again at a later point.
And
So yeah, so
there's only one rule book that I haven't been upset that had notes all over it.
which was?
The one SKR's personal core rule book that he gave me.
Oh, yes.
I was really excited to see there's notes in the margins.
Well, I have a second copy of this book, Barum, and this one was specifically done for reviews, so it was destroyed for reviews as well.
Yeah.
Maybe someday people will want my notes and my margins.
And but that doesn't mean that our audience is going to be starved for content because the Gen Con seminars are hitting the stream.
Opposite.
Man, between two No Directions, Adventurous, the upcoming playtest, any Geek Togethers that happen to get made between then and there, the upcoming
Geek
RPG
Together is going to be non-con season stuff. So when Gen Con's done, Geek Together will be back.
Our upcoming RPG Design Club, which
Nice.
I'm editing the first few episodes of that. We're going to be filming some more soon. We're going to build up a buffer before it comes out, but it'll be soon. They're really good. You knew that getting BJ Hensley, Alex Agunas, and Owen Casey Stevens to talk about game design would make good content. Oh my gosh.
Yeah, no, Param, I am legitimately super excited for this show. I
Oh,
cannot
man.
wait for it. I have not heard any of
I'm
your recordings.
animating
I'm
so
going to be
many
hearing it as a
orcs.
fan.
I'm animating so many orcs and pies.
All right.
Yeah, there's a talk where the orc and pie thing was explained by Owen, and so it became, and because we're animating some of the explanation section, so I got my little orc and I've got my little pie, and things are happening.
Nice.
We'd like to thank Paizo Publishing, or I keep wanting to call them that, even though that hasn't been their name in years. Paizo, because they teamed up with us to do the Gen Con covers that you're hearing now. They provided us with a whole bunch of prizes that we gave away at Gen Con. That was live streamed. You can see the videos now on their Twitch channel. They've all been broken out, so that's where you can go see the video. But if you're wanting the audio, we're releasing that on a daily basis on their podcast stream, like usually happens with their podcast stuff. And it's all being collected on the con recording section on nodirectionpodcast.com. And oh my gosh, that was so much work. That was a crazy amount of work. Oh, okay, we have to talk about this. We cannot.
So now we're talking about
Gen
Gen Con. I think people have kind of gotten the idea that, boy, the two of us have been doing a lot of work for the last couple of months, and
my gosh.
that will continue, but we're slowly on the decline, right? Now that we've got the rulebook review out of the way.
Yeah, this was the biggest stressor I had besides the RPG Design Club next batch of episodes, and oh man, this is a huge weight off my shoulders that we just did this episode. But speaking of weight on my shoulders, working up about a month before when we got approached by Paizo about that partnership, which we were super psyched about. I mean, that's a huge opportunity for the network.
Actually, do you mind if we go into the conversation we had when they presented the idea to us?
Maybe? What's up?
Well, just that you said, here, like, Paizo said, hey, we'd like to talk to you. It was at a time that I couldn't make it, but you were going to be the one handling anyway. So you went off, you had the conversation, you came back to me with the summary, and I was like, that's a lot of work for you, Param. Like,
yeah.
I just listed concerns after concern after concern, most of which were, don't kill yourself.
Oh boy.
And by the end of it, at one point you were like, do you like this idea at all? And I was like, Param, I love this idea. This is amazing. I am very concerned for you and just what this is going to do for your personal bandwidth.
Oh man, it hurt. I'm not going to be I'm really respecting Owen. Now that I'm getting to work with Owen so much, I really respect him being honest about his mental health and issues and how it works with creativity. I struggle with mental health issues. It is a major battle in my life to deal with major depression constantly, and it is a daily battle to make it through to the next day, and this really pushed it, and because it was a lot of work, and I knew going in, but it was even more work than any of us suspected, Paizo included, and thank goodness for Lauren for stepping in and becoming my full-time assistant for that and making that possible and bearable and somebody to share the pain with. And thank goodness for Dan from Paizo for being with me for every agonizing moment of it and sharing the pain and the frustrations. I need to tell the story of that happening. So, it's time to get this thing started. It's time to Paizo and No Direction teaming up at last to give you the ultimate Gen Con. We was committed to do this. We were bringing the gear. Paizo has a ton of really great streaming gear. I have a ton of duct tape and chewing gum streaming gear, and by our powers combined, we were going to bring you Gen Con live. So I figure out early on that, hey, we might want to set up in advance the day before, not the morning of, because reasons. And so me and Dan meet up. I get into town I get into town on Tuesday. I stay the night, and I meet up with Dan Wednesday morning. We get into the streaming room, and we just start setting up and talking about how we're going to do it and our equipment and seeing who's got what, what's got what, how we're going to work it with Gen Con stuff. And nothing goes right. Absolutely nothing goes right. Everything we hook up breaks. Everything we try doesn't work. He has 3 capture cards. 2 of them don't work. My gear, I have all the parts that won't solve the problem involved here. Just the cable lengths weren't working, and we couldn't connect the cables together. We set it up like 5 different layouts, and had to take it apart more than that. It took 12 hours of setup time from the moment we started to get that stream room going, to be able to bring you the show we brought you, where we had live chat and banter between segments, and we had multiple camera views, and we were able to talk with the chat and do prize giveaways and actually bring you a show, not just turn the camera on and show you them chatting at the desk until the next group chats at the desk. We wanted to make a show of it. And at the end, we realized that this is not going to work. We don't have the equipment. All the stuff we needed that we brought is broke. We can't find any place in town that has the stuff we need. Like, we were starting to talk about, I was going to take an Uber 20 minutes to go to a Best Buy and hope they had the equipment we needed, and there was a good chance they wouldn't. And we finally figured out that Indianapolis has Amazon Now, which is 2-hour delivery of anything you order on Amazon, with a limited selection. But that limited selection included a whole bunch of audio video gear. So I was able to place an Amazon order and have it delivered to the bar where we went to, because we needed a bar at that point. Frustration levels were high. But Amazon came in with the equipment clutch we needed, and we finally got it all set up like close to midnight on Wednesday before I went and crashed. And that is how that stream was built, with very literal blood, sweat, and tears. And I do not drink as a person, and I had a drink that night.
Yeah, I only caught hints of this. Like, I definitely saw the things you were posting online, and I was like, oh, no, this is worse than I thought. And then you just never wanted to tell me the story for the rest of the weekend. It was like there was too many other things you had to focus on. So this is the first time I'm hearing the full length that you went through, and my goodness.
Yeah, and there's more to it than that, but I want to protect the innocent. The names are like, there were some very well-meaning people that wanted to spend time with me, and I had to very politely spend some time and then get away. I did not mean that to be rude. If I ditched you during Gen Con, it was because the world was on fire and I was on my last nerve and dealing with stress on levels I've never dealt with before, because this was proving to be twice the job either of us suspected in our worst case scenario. But it did come through. We pulled it off. Then Lauren came around and helped with the running of the streams, enabled me to actually take a break and enjoy what little bit of the Gen Con I could in little hour segments away from the streamcast. And she handled the stream like a pro. We really represented the network well. And it also helped that we got our uniforms. I'm not going to wear this on the podcast always, but I figured just this once. We got uniforms.
You're reversed. There you go.
Yeah. There we go. We really, if we were going to quite literally at points in times, me and Lauren were literally representing Paizo as official Paizo. We wanted to look the part, so Ryan and me got together and designed up some shirts and got them ordered real quick, and I hauled them up with me from Gen Con. We did, get this, Ryan, we did 43 hours of broadcasting.
Wow.
Yeah. And we did it. Like, oh boy, we put those hours in and brought 43 hours of live entertainment from Gen Con to make that happen. And you can go watch it right now on their Twitch channel. It's been archived and preserved. We're going to be releasing it on the audio stream, and we hope you guys enjoy it, because oh boy, do we hope that was worth it. We do hope it was worth it.
What amazed me, so when you were talking about this plan, I didn't know that in between panels you were going to be a live MC on the Twitch channel.
Right.
And so I just assumed 45-minute panel, 15-minute downtime. And no, instead, like, when the panel went off, you went from technical guy to MC, and you worked 10-hour days, 4 days in a row on, like, the biggest gaming weekend of them all.
Right.
Like, I am stunned with the amount of work that you put in on that weekend.
And
just,
Lauren and Dan.
Yes.
Like, okay, I did a lot of that work and a lot of that emceeing, but they were sharing every minute of that pain. Lauren deserves a massive amount of credit for coming up and volunteering and giving up her weekend right before her finals, which she only told me when she was here, or I would not have. Okay, she's a grown woman and able to do her own choices, but I could not have, in good conscience, accepted her assistance with if I knew finals were literally the next day. And then Dan, of course, well, he is Paizo. This was his job too, but he did not just bail on us. He was very, very much making sure we had what we needed. He was there between panels. He was getting us prizes, getting us extra prizes, because we weren't actually going to give anything away on Sunday, and then he got us some prizes to give away on Sunday. Nice. And all kinds of cool stuff.
Yeah, when I was talking to Lauren at one point, like, she was describing how she was there for you, but I knew that how much work she was also putting in. And it was just like a Lois Lane Superman moment of like, well, you've got him, but who's got you? And she described that you were very much there for her, and just like the work that had to be done is what motivated her and kept her sane. And yeah, I could not be more proud or impressed with the two of you. And with Dan. I shouldn't minimize what Dan contributed as well, because like you said, Dan could have done a lot less, but he was definitely there for you. This was a joint effort. He was making sure that we were represented and we got the credit that we deserved for the work that you were doing. So we as a network for the work that you two were doing. And from what I saw, you guys really were bonding, and you went through something together.
Yeah, we went through hell and came out the other side. Oh man, like literally, because they also didn't have the air conditioning turned on in that room, and you know what that's like. 12 hours in a 90-degree room, running cable and taping it off and moving tables, and man, by the time it was done, I was streaked with sweat. So was Dan. Oh my gosh, was it an insane amount it was an experience. It was an experience, and we really hope that should we ever do such a crazy thing again, that we have at least learned to do it better.
So that was one of the two things that we did with Paizo. You and I got a special invitation to a very awesome game on Thursday nights where we would be playtesting Pathfinder 2nd Edition live, run by Jason Bowman. We were playing on the stage with members of the Dragons and Things podcast. And this might be the highlight of any Gen Con I have ever been to. I had so much fun. It was just amazing. That
was the moment that turned it around, because before that, it had just been, here's a whole bunch of hell, and here's a whole bunch of work. And then that was the point where Gen Con became fun, because up until that point, I was just like, I don't know if I'm going to make it, man. I don't know if I'm going to make it. And that was the one finally, oh, and this is why we're doing this.
And I don't know how many people, well, I know the large audience that watched it. We had like 6,000 live viewers. That was an insane number of live viewers. I was very happy with that number. I don't know how many people that are our regular audience were in those 6,000. Majuba is, oh, sorry, that's not Majuba, that's Majuna. I assumed that was Majuba. Are there... Majuba, was that a typo?
We've got a temporary
different
link
person?
we can give you,
Yes.
but there is some legal issues involved here because that was not a Paizo thing. And so that was a Gen Con thing. They technically own that performance, not us. So we don't have a legal right to rehost or rebroadcast it. But here is a link to where Gen Con is hosting it. I posted it in chat. I'm going to try to at least archive it for my own personal reasons and hope it doesn't disappear into the ether, because I have not seen Gen Con preserving these videos, and Twitch will erase them eventually, and I'm worried that that's going to happen. So watch it while you can. Watch it while you can.
And even if we get permission to release the audio, I feel like there was a lot of subtle stuff that was going on the stage. Like, it's worth watching the video for that.
Oh, do we keep the egg, the snakes, and the rope? Okay, so I believe the egg and the dragon went with the dragons and things.
Spoilers.
Crew.
Anyway, continue.
Okay. And I kept a snake. Did you keep a snake?
I kept a snake as well. I gave one to Abigail.
Yeah. Okay, sweet. Yeah. So I still have the pink snake, and it is in my bedroom, and it will be something I treasure for all time.
And I don't think anyone took the 50 pounds of rope.
No. We all joked about it, but that thing's... When he said stinky rope, that was stinky rope. That rope was putrid. I did not want that anywhere
I don't understand
near...
what your issue was. I thought it was a nice, musky smell. Reminded me of nature.
There's a lot of things that are musky in nature that I don't want in my bedroom.
Majuna wants us to post the link again. All right, well, I'll post it this time. Whoops, no, I just posted it into that video. So there you go, Majuna. I'm not sure what the issue was. If you couldn't see Param's, I don't know why you wouldn't be able to see mine. Okay, well, you can see mine. Well, that worked.
Yep.
Yeah, watch it while you can, because people might not be able to see it again.
Yeah, I don't know if they're preserving these. I don't know if anybody's going through that effort.
A couple of takeaways from that. So I played Jason Catman.
Oh,
Barbarian with the cat totem.
You were the star of the show by far.
By the end of the weekend, Jason Catman, I was getting more recognized for that Twitch stream than I was for this show or for any of the game design that I do. It was, and I just didn't know how to react to that. Like, I've got my go-tos of when somebody recognizes me from the show, and I can turn it into a conversation. But it was just like, we loved you role-playing, and it's like, well, do you role-play? Like, I don't know. I didn't know how to follow up on it. But it was just funny that, for whatever reason, I really connected with people when I was playing that barbarian obsessed with cats and very cat-like in nature.
When you started off by pushing the glass off our patron's table, you sold the whole show. That's when the tone was set for everybody. There was
two moments in that moment. One was Jason explains to the people, to us, that there's a patron there with a drink, and I was like, well, then I want to knock that drink over, and it got no reaction when I said it. But then when I put my hand on the table and start miming knocking the drink over like a cat, that got the reaction. But before I started doing that, I had a moment of did all my plans go wrong? Do people just not get what I'm going for? All right, well, I'm going for it anyway. And luckily, yeah, people were definitely on board, and a lot of fun was had.
Yeah. I played Robert, who was a televangelist of Abadar, and I had a long time, a non-trivial portion of my time in that game was negotiating turnip insurance. And then regretting that I was going to have to pay out that turnip insurance. Dang it.
And it felt like multiple times. So you would say something, and Jason would respond, and it often felt like Jason was dismissing you with his answer, and then you would turn it into the next part of the negotiation, and you would never let them just say, sure, we'll give you however many turnips you want. It was always like, well, if you're willing to give me that much, what else can I get from these people?
To be fair, when Jason gave us those characters to choose from, it was very important that he put out, we are terrible people, and we are supposed to act terribly. And there was I had to be greedy, but honest about it. And you, man. And then we had the dwarf mage that was in jail, and the really sweetest goblin we ever played with.
And I loved mechanically how the goblin was built, because Jason Bullman intentionally gave it just terrible stats, penalties and everything, but a lucky sweater that her grandmother knitted her that allowed her to roll twice for everything.
She had infinite hero points.
That's it, infinite hero points. And she used it, and sometimes it actually pulled through, and oftentimes she was just failing left and right.
We forgot. Pathfinder 2 has hero points now as part of the core system.
Oh, yeah, how about that? Hero points.
Yeah, they're exactly the same as my hero points that I have told you guys about. So, yay. If you've heard me rant about it, that's exactly what it is.
Yeah, I'm happy with it.
Yeah, it's great.
I
like it.
I have no deep thoughts on the matter.
I've been doing it. To be fair, my idea's not original. I'm not saying they copied mine, but I'm just saying I've been playing with these rules for 10 years. They're great. I like them. And I'm glad that they're going to be part of the core game from now on, and they're not just going to be my crazy house rule.
All right, I guess I do have some thoughts on it. So I do like the idea that you could encourage people to do the harder roll and try the harder thing, because it's usually more interesting and dynamic, and you are rewarding for them even though it's more likely that they fail. Like, I don't like giving a hero point for rolling a natural 20.
No.
And just when it was the natural thing. No, it's like it's the attempt at something insane, so that the game gets more. You're incentivizing insanity. You're incentivizing people to just go out there and really like be just a lot more aggressive, a lot more compassionate, a lot more engaged in what they're doing. And so the psychology of hero points I very much appreciate.
I wonder how they're going to work in with PFS, because you get one hero point for free just for showing up. You can earn a hero point in game by doing something heroic or going for that extra DC, or other awesome stuff. And one hero point is earned from out of game awesomeness, such as hosting the game, or bringing snacks, or volunteering to be the loot list person, or volunteering to be the mapper. Which I understand giving people cookies, but I usually resort to real cookies for those things.
Now they can bake their own cookies and re-roll if they don't like the first check.
Oh, man. Rerolls are awesome in PF2. They kind of took a lot of the restrictions off. And, man, I can't imagine playing a halfling that isn't Lucky Halfling. That's just such a good feat.
All right, well, getting back to the Ancestry feats, I was worried that a lot of the heritage feats were just go-tos, which kind of defeated the purpose of giving them options of, like, build your own class options, but here's the obvious first choice. If you don't make it as your first choice, you never get to make it again.
Yeah,
at least. Yeah. The gnome probably is one of the more loose ones that people like. You basically get sent, but it happened to work with my build, so that's why I ended up with it. All right. What else happened at Gen Con? Like, we basically summed up your Gen Con. You were in that room.
Yeah, I was in that room, and then I was not in that room when I went to the other room and filmed that thing with you, and then we went to the bar, and then I crashed, and then I went back to the streaming room. I did get a little bit of floor time.
Did you?
Yeah, like a couple of hours only. We each got a daily break during the stream that we would go and, bathroom, lunch, and then floor time. So I did get to meet up with Chris Jackson, and we hope to bring him on the show soon, so he can tell you all about his awesome experience with real pirates.
Yeah, for people that don't know, Chris Jackson was the author of the Pathfinder Tales, the Pirate line, and a lot of that is from personal experience.
He's got a new pirate book out that's not related to the Pathfinder Tales line. I hate that I don't have the name of the book, but Chris Jackson pirate book. It's going to be great, likely, because he knows. I haven't read it yet, but he knows the sea. He knows sailing like very few other authors do, because he lives on the sea, literally. And he had a run-in with real pirates, and he'll probably tell you the story when he comes on the show in the future when we get him back on. So I got to meet him, got his new book, got it signed, got to chat with him and his wife. That was amazing. I picked up The Mind, that awesome game we've talked about on the show before.
Did we talk about it? Yeah, we must have.
Yeah, we had
the post-PaizoCon episode?
Yeah, I think so. I picked that up. I'm going to try out Hero Realms, the fantasy version of Star Realms, and evidently it's got a really fun co-op expansion for it, and I need more co-op games that I can play quickly in my life. And I picked up some of the most amazing dice I've ever seen.
Oh, yes.
These aquamarine dice that I don't know that the
Camera's not doing them justice.
Yeah, because they're real aquamarine, and you can actually see the light shimmer through them because they're semi-translucent, and they got gold inlays, and they're just so pretty, and they're really hefty, like they've got some weight to them, and I'm gonna have to never use them without one of my leather dice trays because I don't want to scratch them or chip them, but yay. This is the second set of dice that I've really splurged on. The first set was my all wooden dice, which wooden dice are expensive because it's hard to carve perfect dice out of wood.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, artisan
Even
dice.
with lasers, I have a feeling that the density is not like pure enough for proper rolling.
No. The artisan dice, they have like some videos up of how they do it. It's a lot of handcrafting and stuff involved. So.
Bastille is asking if you were talking about the guy in the boat that did a live show a while back. Yes,
that's him. That's Chris Jackson. Yeah, he did a live show with us on a boat in the middle of the ocean.
Well, because for several years that was his home.
It's
he
still
had
his
land
home.
address.
He has a
no,
land
he's got
address
a second
now.
home with a land address.
Yeah, but he still spends months on that boat.
Yep.
And he was telling me they have another trip planned that's going to take them months coming up soon. So as far as I'm concerned, he still lives on that boat. He just also happens to sometimes not live on that boat. I think we're winding down.
Yeah.
Anything we have to touch?
Any of my Gen Con stories are all very like industry and shop related. Like it was a working one. I worked all my jobs. You know what? No, I will go into it a little bit because it seems like just from conversations, people don't know what I do.
Right.
They have a few vague ideas, but that's so. I work for Blind Ferret Entertainment, and up until recently, I was developing our tie-in products. So if you go to lfg.co or licd.com and you click on the store, you'll see a whole bunch of products. I worked on a chunk of those, basically from 3 years ago to late last year. The last project that I worked on was the Richard action figure, which I'm super proud of. It is super awesome and it is one of the best products that we released.
Yeah, I was surprised at how the quality of that. I expected no offense, I expected what I usually see from gaming tie-in action figures, which are really cheap, vaguely resemble the character figures, and you produced something that looked like it could have been a Figma from Japan.
All right, I am going to take a second to say I am very good at my job.
Yes.
I take a lot of pride and passion in my job, and I was not going to settle for anything less than the best action figure we could make. A lot of our products are just, boy, what's a crazy thing I can make? And that's where we've got the luggage tag and the socks and stuff. And honestly, any one thing that I've developed should be the first step in a career of developing just that one thing. But my job is flexible enough that I have to keep developing in new categories. And so I've just become an expert at becoming experts at making things. And so it's kind of dawned on me in the last couple of years when I would talk to other people in the industry and they would present a problem. I would be like, this is how you solve that. I'm kind of like the guy who's got a guy, but I'm the guy.
You're the fixer.
Yeah. And so for all those products that like I stand behind them, I enjoy them, but the market was not always there. There is not a market for Richard Argyle socks, it ends up. And we ordered over 1,000 of those. We have a lot of Richard socks in the warehouse. But the thing that I was developing that was always selling through was our games. Like we are down to 3 copies of the LFG Pathfinder box set, which is what I pitched as a freelancer and got me hired at Blind Ferret full time. And Orphans and Ashes sells consistently well, even though the board game industry is a flavor of the month industry. This one is consistently every Gen Con we set up. People are just attracted to the concept, but then when they actually sit down and play it, they enjoy it. We convert a lot of demos into sales, and we're continuing to expand on it. And it's developing a following. And then we just released Storytime with Dick, which just was a huge success for us. It sold better than any one new product and that launched at a con that I can remember. Better than Orphans. Oh no, Orphans and Ashes may have outsold it per unit, but it still had a great conversion rate for demos. Super positive feedback. It's a game that has much more of a future than I originally expected it to. That was kind of like, I'm developing a lot of products, a lot of games. That was the one that I put only a certain amount of time into because it was like, oh, I've got this idea. It's pretty straightforward. I'll release it. And it's solid. Like, I am proud of that in a way that I never expected to be. So anyway, yeah. So now I'm developing our games, and we've had so much success with our licensed games that we are now doing original content, and that's going to be my focus for the next year. And so a lot of my Gen Con was meeting with people that could potentially help me with those things. So graphic designers, because we've got a great art department, but they're not gamers, so they don't have... Board game graphic design is a very specific need-based type of graphic design that simply artist graphic designers have a lot of trouble with, and we have artist graphic designers at the company. So I'm looking for freelance graphic designers with with a gaming background. Board Game Bento continues to go fairly strong, but specifically the publishers love us and love me by extension of it. And so I was taking meetings for Board Game Bento, and there's a lot of potential plans there. And then I was at the booth selling. So, like, my Gen Con was swapping between the many different things and different jobs I have within the industry multiple times in a couple of hours, while also doing just the most remote of stuff for the network. Like, this is... It's almost embarrassing how little I do for the network at Gen Con, because Gen Con is a huge weekend for the network. Like, our live audience tonight was twice our live audience at the last live episode at its peak, and that is 100% because of the networking that you've done in the last couple of months, Param. Bastille wants to know if there's going to be a TUI update for the Mosaic Mage. Not on my plate right now, Bastille. My freelance time is very limited.
Yeah. There's the TUI is such a weird beast that I don't know that a lot of people have definitive answers to that question, because it very much still is what Pathfinder had. It's a sequel to what Pathfinder became, but not what Pathfinder started as.
Yeah. Oh yeah, and then the other thing at Gen Con is just trying to meet with people. Like, we had all 12 staffers for the network. Are we up to 12 staff at this point?
Everybody was there. Everybody person
was there, but what's the exact number? Like, we are much more people than I realized were working on the network.
Okay, so I ordered 17 shirts.
Yeah, and you and I got 4
I ordered
each.
19 shirts, and me and you got 4 each.
So that's 11
plus us
for the rest of the
13.
network.
So it's 13 of us now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That didn't dawn on me until we were at Gen Con, and it was just an effort to try and get everybody in the same room. And at most, there were half of us in the same place at the same time, and that still felt like a huge gang. And then there were other people that I only get to see once a year at Gen Con, so like this Gen Con was the biggest blur for me. Like, Sunday, I was going around still taking meetings, and some people were like, oh, there's only 4 hours left, and then we get to go home. And I'm like, can I have another 4 days of Gen Con? Because there's so much more I need to do.
I would like another 4 days of Gen Con.
Yeah, no kidding.
I'm like, at this point, I'm kind of like scrounging for hobo cons just to sort of get a vicarious experience of it. It's like, there's an anime convention this weekend over in Lexington, and there's this PAX Unplugged thing. Is that even remotely feasible? Probably not, but...
Well, if it's even remotely feasible, look into it. I don't know. Where is Kentucky in relationship to Philly? I feel like Philly is further south than I think.
I can drive there, but it's a hotel expense thing.
Okay.
It costs as much to stay there as it does to stay at Gen Con.
Couldn't you crash with the network members that live in Philly?
I have not asked.
Yeah, and I am volunteering them. No, I don't know. But if that's the only... if that's the main hurdle, I feel like there's at least an obvious way to try and get over it.
We need to...
You know what's weird, Param?
What?
There's like very little news that came out of Gen Con.
I know. There's some Starfinder news we'll talk about. There's the new beginner box for Starfinder, which is very good news, but not exciting news. Like, it's an important product to exist, but we know that that's a known quantity, and it's not going to be for the majority of our audience. The other bit of news was the wilderness tiles that got accidentally announced on one of our panels.
No, the Darklands.
The Darklands, yeah, because the wilderness one we knew.
Darklands.
Yeah, and then that's when Eric Wellness says, and you heard about it first on No Direction, and we were really thankful for the name drop. But
right,
that's
yeah.
it.
Let's get ready
it.
to wrap things up. I feel like fourth day of Gen Con, where it's just like we've been through a lot, and that's appropriate for this show because this is kind of like peak of the pre-Gen Con, post-Gen Con sprint that we do, which is sprintier than ever before this year.
It's honestly felt like a marathon run from about a month before PaizoCon to now. We have just been slammed with PaizoCon, post-PaizoCon, Gen Con, just one merged insane state for the network.
Yeah. Throwing in Adventurous, launching that right around that time. Now you're launching the Design Club.
The Design Club was meant to fill a gap because it felt like, well, Pathfinder's kind of in a rut right now, and there's not much to talk about there, so it's time to let's launch some new shows. And then Design Club was awesome, and we're going to totally do that and still go forward. And then, we have Roll20 approach us about actual play, and then, oh gosh, and then Paizo decides that to approach us with partnerships with Gen Con and other opportunities. Let's put some credit where it's due. Paizo is supporting us to make this actual play thing happen. That's we need to be upfront about that. They're providing us with the books. That was part of the reason they did so, is because we said we were going to do that. Which is great opportunities for the network, but it's a lot on their plate all at once.
And it's like there's been a couple of these opportunities from Paizo directly, and what's great is that they are letting us take so much ownership over these opportunities that they're providing us for. Like after the actual play, not the actual play, the 2E playtest that we did on Thursday night, Dan and Jason just kept thanking us. And I just kept questioning, like, why are you thanking us? Like, you just put us in front of a live audience of 6,000 people. It's unbelievable just how much exposure we got from this. And I know exposure is almost a bad word when it comes to doing artistic stuff, but but
we're a podcast. That's different.
Yeah, anyway, it's still a form of artistic endeavor. It's passion based anyway.
Yeah.
But yeah, like coming out the other side of this Gen Con, the work that you and Dan and Lauren put together has done so much for the network, and that playtest as well. Like, it's just anyway. No, this past year has felt like a dynamic shift for the network, and it's for the positive. And I want to thank you for all the work that you've done towards it, because you've often been pushing for treating the network very professionally. Like I like a good regimented schedule, but that's about as professional as I like to push for. But you really have had an eye for growing numbers and making sure that we are established and that people recognize No Direction as a brand, and it's really paying off now, Param.
I'm blushing now, but you're awesome. You're kind of the reason this exists.
Yeah, but I'm effortless.
And we have an amazing team that I still am amazed volunteer to work for us. Like, what? Yep. Like, really, guys? We love you. You're awesome. We don't deserve you.
Yeah, I feel like we're in that same position we were on Thursday night of Gen Con, where it's like, why are you thanking us? But like, the network members thank us sometimes, and I don't understand what I'm being thanked for.
Yeah, I feel guilty sometimes for like, oh, you're gonna write this amazing blog for us every week. Awesome. Yep. Yes, we'll have you. You do know none of us get paid for this, right?
Well, that's not entirely true now. I mean, we do have the Patreon.
Oh, yes. But right now, the Patreon is going into the network. We're not taking
it pays off debt.
Yeah.
And pays for a few projects.
Up until now, No Direction's pocketbook has been a few really great sponsors, but we have a lot of integrity on our sponsor acceptance, and we also have a disdain for some of the practices in sponsorship. And
I don't know about disdain, but it makes it feel more like work.
Yeah.
Whereas a lot of the other stuff we do, even when it's hard, it's fun.
so we turned down a lot of sponsorship. And so it's No Direction's just been mine and Ryan's pocket paying for it all.
Well, okay, we had the Kickstarter.
And the
With
Kickstarter.
the Kickstarter right up front, I said, if we
Yeah.
don't have this Kickstarter, my computer is not capable of continuing to produce No Direction anymore.
Yes.
So there was other things that, because we did overfund, so we were able to get the camera, which upped our convention coverage. But like, basically, without the Kickstarter, most of the Kickstarter went to getting me audio editing optimized computer and streaming computer so that we can continue to do the show. And it deferred a few of the monthly costs for hosting and whatever. But man, hosting cost is starting to get expensive because we have a massive catalog of audio.
You guys okay, so we've got some. When they started charging us for bandwidth, and our bandwidth was no longer unlimited, it validated that there's a whole lot of you all out there that listen to us, and we appreciate all the thousands of you a lot. Thank you all so much for listening to us. Oh my gosh, when I saw that meter of bandwidth, just get Stephen Glicker's been helping us with getting the hosting. He's just giving us the images of that as it just ticks away super fast. I'm like, oh, we have a lot of people that listen to us. I hope we can afford to keep doing this.
Which is where the Patreon comes in.
Yes.
So we should thank our patrons. We've got hundreds of people that are giving us a regular donation, and it is very much appreciated. It helps defer a lot of costs. Sorry, we don't have hundreds of people. We're making hundreds of dollars. Yeah, it very much helps with everything we do, and we've got ambitious projects that we are continuing to launch, and so I hope that people that are donating to us, I hope you are seeing increased coverage, increased content from us, and that you see how your support is helping the network grow and helping us provide you with more content and do more fun things.
Also, to our very top subscribers, patrons, our very top level patrons, thank you all so much, especially. We appreciate every patron, but those of you that have gone that extra mile, we appreciate. We expect us to. They've earned their reward, so we expect us to reach out soon or reach out to us on that one. We need to know what you want to do with your hour of our time.
And I know we've been giving regular updates about how the unconditioned cards are coming. Now that the first one is more or less done and almost ready to ship, the second one will be a lot faster to turn around. There's just a lot of initial setup stuff that delayed it. But
a lot of that was just finding the right artist, and then we had an artist, but then that wasn't going to work out for reasons that are not. We're not going to disparage the artist.
Reasons.
It's just reasons that the logistics wasn't working out. Not disparaging the other artist at all, but we need an artist that could produce on a schedule for a price we could afford, and boy howdy, that first card looks great.
I'm going to defend the artist. His wife had a brain tumor, and that took all of his time. This is not an artist that was missing out because he was unprofessional. I
was not saying he was unprofessional.
Oh, it just felt like you were saying they had to keep to a schedule. And it's like this was not the issue. The issue was
I didn't want to out
a very serious health concern.
Sorry, I didn't want to name the artist, and I didn't want to out this situation.
Yeah.
No. At all, no blame at all on the artist at all. Don't ever wish I said anything that was that. I was, in order to bring you the reward, we had to find an artist that could do it.
Yeah. Which we did. It's Chris Kimmel, who we mentioned earlier, is an active member of our Discord. He and I have been working together on the Enthusiast, I believe, is the direction we ended up going with for the first one. Yeah, so the Enthusiast card, Param, you and I are going to have to write an art order for whatever card is going to be based on you.
Oh my gosh.
That's going to be the next one on the slate.
Yeah, I need to figure out what that one is.
Get thinking about it.
Yep. All right.
When we have free time, we'll discuss it.
Oh, yeah. That infinite amount of free time I've got. So, wait, are we up to 7 or 8 podcasts now?
No, not that many. Hold on.
Okay, so no
Private
direction.
Sanctuary's retired, effectively,
No direction.
right? Yeah.
No direction beyond.
Beyond.
Okay. Then there is no direction of interest.
Yep.
Okay. Then there's the unnamed actual play.
Yep.
Okay. There's Geek Together.
Yep. Yeah, I'll still count that one.
RPG Design Club.
Yep. That's 6.
6. We don't have a 7th.
No. Private Sanctuary is effectively retired. There is potential that Majuba, actually, the person who is not Majuna, who's in chat, but at PaizoCon, Majuba was saying, like, if No Direction transfers over to 2nd edition, will there become a No Direction Private Sanctuary, or a 1st edition Private Sanctuary? And it's like, that's a very strong possibility. It's a good idea. So it's that might be something that gets added to the slate at some point.
Mm-hmm.
But
and we've talked about a 7th that we're not anywhere near ready to talk about publicly.
No, but I know exactly what I would do with it.
Yeah.
And it's not the G.I. Joe one we alluded to on the live cast that Dan was interviewing me about.
No. I mean, we could do a G.I. Joe one, but I think that was part of Geek Together, is to facilitate your G.I. Joe nerddom.
It's good. Geek Together doesn't touch up on G.I. Joe as much as possible, as much as you would think. I actually, I'll talk about this. This is more a crazy idea than anything I ever actually plan on implementing. But at one point, there was a show called Sigma 6. This is a G.I. Joe cartoon.
Oh, I love Sigma 6.
So I loved the figures. The first season of the show was pretty rough because they were chasing Power Stones, and a lot of people made the G.I. Joe comparison. The Pokemon comparison. So Sigma 6 is now available on a legal streaming service for free that I forget the name of. And I was thinking of a show called G.I. Joe Came On, where I would watch every episode and review it one at a time of Sigma 6. And then once Sigma 6 was done, because the second season is solid, but that first season is rough. Basically go like from the most obscure G.I. Joe cartoons until building up to the Sunbow one, which is the one that most people remember. But I am honestly never going to do this podcast. I just know exactly how I would do that. All right, you know what? If the Patreon is ever making $10,000 a month, then I will release G.I. Joe Came On. So there we go. I have a stretch goal to write. I also need to do an update. This whole Gen Con thing has distracted me. July 31st was my last update. Yeah, we're due for a post-Gen Con update.
And we need to get a schedule thing down for our the Insiders group.
Yep.
Do y'all know what we up to? All right.
Vera Johnson, I believe you just joined. Yeah, we're done. We've been done for a while, but we're just spitballing, unraveling. I'm not sure exactly what to call it. I'm having fun still. It's almost like we're doing a post show in the middle of the show.
Yeah. Oh man, but we need to call it. This is now 4 hours of podcast.
Yeah, all right, we're calling this. So thank you for joining us for another episode of for episode 183 of No Direction, the Pathfinder News, Reviews, and Interviews podcast. I'm Ryan Costello.
And I'm Jefferson J. Thacker, also known as Param.
And if you want to find the path, you need No Direction.
Bye, guys.